All right, welcome back, everybody, viewers, listeners. We're here with episode 29 of the On Patrol podcast. There's some different people on this podcast, and we're going to introduce them here shortly. We're joined with some Eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, tri-state area people. I guess we'll call them transient in there. Natives, Jeffrey Cavender and Chris Newman, and then I'm one of your co-hosts here, Fightin Kentuckian. We also have a third co-host joining us. That's the Caterpillar on Wyndhurst Productions Face, and I'll turn it over for him to introduce himself.
Hey, Wyndhurst Kentuckian. Wyndhurst Kentuckian. Wow. Man, you know it's late. Wyndhurst Production.
All right, so we're happy to be back, and on this episode, me and Wyndhurst have been talking about, getting historical, in episode 29 here, getting historical battles to the tabletop. And we are on this page. Highly suggest people, if you don't go out and do it, go and add yourself to this Facebook group, Ashland, Kentucky Gamers, and you'll see some of Jeff and Chris's amazing work. But what kind of keen mine and Wyndhurst's interest is, while we were on this group, is they brought a historical scenario to life, and it's the Battle of Point Pleasant. Bringing a historical tabletop scenario to life is what we're going to talk about. So. We really appreciate you guys being here with us. We're really looking forward to diving into Chris and Jeff and getting to know them as well, and talking about kind of how do we think about these things and how do we get these things to the tabletop. And if Jeff had it his way, it might be a lot easier than some of us think. Just go around and do it. But we truly appreciate you guys being here and look forward to the journey of this episode. So without any further ado, grab your shield, your spear, your musket, maybe, for the Battle Point Pleasant, and your belt-fed machine gun, and join us on Tomahawk as well, yeah, Jeff, and join us on this episode of On Patrol. So I'll kick it over to Wyndhurst.
Yep, so before we get into our questions, we just want to knock out allies, caveats, and piggybacks from last episode, just a little bit of housekeeping. I didn't have a whole lot. I've said multiple times, this technology stuff is not part of our primary duties in the military, so we're just doing the best we can. So last episode we did lose video halfway through. I am trying something slightly different today, which might hopefully reduce that problem, or you're looking at a black screen, and we'll know only when I go to edit it later. But hopefully that'll be resolved.
China's winning.
Yeah. Hopefully we figure that out. But we just do this for the fun of it, so bear with us. I didn't have any specific alibis or caveats from the episode itself as far as the content. Kentuckian, did you have anything you want to talk about?
No, Andy was great. Again, go look him up, look at his books. I had, I think, 2 or 3 messages about trying to find some of his books. I told people to go to Amazon to find some of his painting books. Definitely highly recommend. You can have them right here, so I'm going to grab them. Look at that. But you can grab most of them on Amazon. I will say, I think there's some that you can only grab from the publishing company like Pen and Sword. I think there were some people that had a hard time getting them on eBay and stuff like that. So look at Pen and Sword as well, and they have a lot of other kind of hobby books. But Andy's stuff is great, and Andy is just he's always told everybody, message him and stuff if you have any questions. So I highly recommend, go to the Volley Fire Painting, go to Andy. He's super helpful. It was an awesome conversation. Nothing else from alibis and caveats, and we want to dive into this conversation. So I'll go ahead and lead us into our what we're going to talk about today. So Jeff and Chris, we genuinely appreciate you being here with us and taking the time to talk to us today. You both have a rich history in the Wargames hobby. We've talked a little bit offline about that. And both me and Wyndhurst are really impressed with all of your latest work in the Battle of Point Pleasant. This historical fight pits the Virginia militia against the Shawnee and Mingo warriors in October of 1774. It's truly magnificent, and we'll try to post some of your pictures of the scenario, the battlefield, the layout, and everything, so that way the viewers can kind of see some of that, or at least send a link to where you guys have posted a lot of that. We're excited to discuss the process of and hoping to ignite and excite others to recreate historical fights on the tabletop, local battles near them or not. Your painting, attention to detail, and the hobby acumen was on full display during your battle posts and your battle kind of report of it when you put it on. And Jeff, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. However, let's continue to pull on this thread And before we get into that topic, let's discover how you and Chris got to the point you are at today. We want the listener and viewer to kind of know a little bit more about you. So we're going to pose these questions to you. So Wyndhurst will pose one question to both of you. And, Jeff, if you want to answer question one first, then Chris, you'll answer question one, and then I'll pose question two, and, I'll start with Chris. But we kind of want them to know, like, hey, who are we talking to? What's their background? And then we'll get into this battle kind of Point Pleasant. So I'll kick it over to Wyndhurst to kind of get us started.
Yep, thanks, Kentuckian. All right, so we always, like you said, always like to ask the same question so it's consistent for our viewers. But we'd like to know, for each of you, when did you get started in the hobby?
Okay, I'm supposed to go first on our side. First of all, thank you guys for having us on. We were big fans, and thanks again for letting us come on the show. All right, I got started in the 1980s playing Dungeons and Dragons, which led to me playing games with my friends like the Hasbro military series, which is like Shogun and Fortress America, etc. That led to Avalon Hill games that were still in board games at this point, which include like Gettysburg and We the People, etc. Then some buddies of mine said, hey, have you seen Warhammer? You paint little men. And I started doing that. Then we went to Necromunda. But then what started me in the historicals was met some people that were doing historical wargaming, and then I asked one of my friends, I said, if you were going to do historical wargaming, where would you start? And he's like, well, I would do the 7 Years' War. That's the very first World War. And you've got all kinds of theaters. You can go India, North America, wherever. So I said, oh, that sounds great. And then I learned about a thing called imaginations, which is you make your own little, musket, horse and musket country. Mine was Cavenderia, and started playing that with, some people and things. And then that led to a long, been playing historical wargaming for a long time. Some of the stuff from my blog got picked up on some Italian guy saw it, said, hey, we want to throw this in a magazine. And then I wrote a little game for Ralpartha Miniatures. So,
oh, awesome.
Yeah, so I've been gaming for a long time, historicals, but I do more the whole genre of games, fantasy, science fiction, etc. But for historicals, that's my main focus.
What'd you write for Ralpartha?
I wrote a game called Warren Lords, which is an anthropomorphic rabbit fighting game.
Oh, sick. That's awesome.
It's fun.
We'll kick it over to Chris, I guess.
Hello, and thanks for having me on. Big fans, listen to you all the time. My journey was probably pretty similar to a lot of people out there. Was a kid in the 70s. My dad was a Vietnam vet, bought me some Army men, and then we had a really nice hobby store down the road from us. And so on a weekend, we may stop by there, may pick up a couple boxes of Airfix figures, and had the World War II. Went over to Napoleonics. Watching movies on Saturdays like Waterloo, Zulu, Longest Day, all that. And one day I went out to the garage with Dad, and he had set up a sand table. And we had the Airfix British 8th Army and Africa Corps fighting on that sand table, and I was hooked.
That's awesome. That's a proper red-blooded American upbringing.
What rules were you using for that first game, or is it just playing around, having fun?
Well, it was playing around, having fun. My dad had Civil War rifles, and he would load Porzone bullets, and we would actually throw 58 caliber musket balls into the sand. And then if you were face up, you were wounded. If you were face down, you were dead. That's about the rules.
That's the best way to start.
And some ad hoc rules about like a Sherman tank could go, 12 inches and stuff like that.
I remember playing with the rubber band gun. My dad, we had all those marks in like 54 millimeter, and we'd do the rubber band gun, and you'd get like a few shots at each side. That's awesome. I want to pull more on that, but I want to get more into the questions because we all have the same. Go ahead, Jeff. Jeff's got his hand raised.
We're all from the same area. You guys ever do fireworks and GI Joes?
Yes. Every red-blooded American, even that's not a wargamer, has done it.
So I would build model ships and then use those like little water dynamite things and sink them. And that's I started on that because my dad told me once, "Oh, I built this aircraft here and put it in the pond and shot it with my 22." And I was like, "That sounds like a lot of fun. I want to try something like that." So that was the closest I got to
Sure.
fireworks and army men.
But I do want to, when we get back into the hobby and we talk about you guys putting on Point Pleasant, I'd like to get into that because, we've talked about that with a lot of our guests. Like, we all have similar upbringings in the hobby, whether it be a parent or somebody, you get the box of miniatures, you get into the hobby, and then you're like, oh, you kind of uh, play with it, if you're in your adolescence or whatever, and then it's like it's a natural progression. But I'm kind of curious, and especially, um, you know, talking a little bit more about your area, we can talk when we get into Point Pleasant about like how are people coming in, if you're getting people into historical wargaming, whether it's you guys putting on scenarios and stuff like that. I just want you to be thinking about that question because I think it might tie into how you put on Point Pleasant stuff later. But
I do have a follow
going
up
to the next,
question, real quick.
go ahead, go ahead.
So a lot of the guys we interview, because they're so involved in the hobby, they mostly tend to have been individuals like Kentuckian who started quite young. So Jeff, I know you said you kind of started with D&D, and Chris, it was having a hobby store nearby. About what age range were you all when you started actual proper wargaming? Would you say?
Proper wargaming wasn't until my mid to late 20s.
Okay.
I did a lot of board gaming at the Avalon Hill, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I didn't meet the guys to push the lead until later. So middle 20s to early 30s, somewhere in that range. I don't know the exact time.
All right. What about you, Chris?
Okay.
Actually, most of my younger days was playing Risk, Axis and Allies with Dad and my uncles and things like that, and then friends in the military. And really didn't start pushing lead around until I ran into Ray, our friend Ray, and he had a shop. And actually, I take that back. When I was in ROTC at Marshall University, we had micro armor, and that was my first introduction to that. They had a whole bunch of micro armor with no barrels, and it aggravated me to death.
GHQ baby.
Yeah, but when Ray had his shop, we played micro armor, and that's probably early 30s, something like that.
Okay. Cool.
Is Ray, does Ray have like a pallet business now where he sells stuff?
No,
Like
sir.
okay, there's a Ray there that like was in that area that I thought had a hobby shop that did like a pallet business thing, but okay, we're just doxing people and I don't even know who they are. That's awesome.
Yeah, Ray's
The
shop's been gone since, what, 2000?
hey, that
Uh,
was
it was around 9/11, something around in there was when we first started
because he
doing
was a
that.
he was a big 40K guy and he ended up getting into like a pallet business and stuff. But we would always joke with him that he used the money to go to Southern Comfort or whatever that place is called. But anyways,
We
moving on.
digress.
That's the listener won't get all those inside jokes.
Hey, don't be working blue. Don't work blue, Kentuckian.
But so the next kind of question is, as the viewer and listener is getting to know you guys, and again, we're in that foxhole again, taking a smoke of our cigarette and whatnot, and sharing our stories here. Kind of, what was the first game or thing that first brought you into the hobby? You had disclosed a little bit about what you guys had said, and normally if the person has that progression, like I think you guys have had, we'll say like what was kind of the first war game that brought you in, and so like pushing miniatures on the table. Not everybody. I sometimes throw off on chip based games. I played my fair share of ASL and stuff, but like what was kind of the first, I'd say, game with a miniatures and getting them onto the table and pushing them? What was that for you guys?
Hey, Chris, you can start. Excluding micro armor, because you already told us micro armor. So what was the first one that actually had infantry and stuff
Yeah,
as well?
yeah.
Really, gosh, that would have been when I got to Ironton and we were playing Napoleonics. That was, I had things. I've always had like tons and tons of 1/72nd scale stuff and putting together models and things like that. We'd play with my sons and all that. But the first real deal, like actual wargaming that I did was, over there in Ironton, doing the Napoleonics, and
I can
then I was hooked.
I can hear all our EU listeners and like across the world because we're, Wyndhurst and all of us on this podcast right now are kind of from the same region and place deep in the Appalachia Hills, as Patty Lovelace says, right? But they're going to be like, Napoleonics was the first war game they played, Viva la Emperor. So that's pretty in the heart of the wilderness in North America. We're gaming some Grenadier Guards and stuff, so that's pretty funny. What about you, Jeff?
My first legitimate military or wargaming experience is the Great Evil Games Workshop, the Warhammer Fantasy, the old school stuff. But I was doing Empire, so I was basically feeling Lange Connects and
Yeah.
Pistoliers and things. So that's where it started. But then after that, I started getting 172nd Civil War guys and doing some of those things. And then Napoleon's Battles was the Avalon Hill game that we had, and then yeah, that's the Warhammer was the gateway in, but then I left that behind really quick.
Good. No, I'm kidding. I'll kick it back to Wyndhurst for the next question.
Yeah, that was a similar start for me. It was Warhammer. I didn't see everybody got introduced to Airfix, and I didn't even know that was a thing because until I discovered Warhammer models, and I was like, "What? People can make models and paint them? It's not just airplanes." So I always feel left out when everyone's like Airfix. I was
you guys are a lot younger than us, so you guys are quite a bit younger.
So one we always always gets really good discussion. Is interesting. Is who is the most influential person in getting you into the hobby? And we've had people say like they had their brother, or it was just an individual who took them under their wing. But for both of you, and we'll start with you, Jeff. Who is if there is, who is the most influential person getting you into the hobby?
Well, it's funny. Newman mentioned him earlier. Ray Rediker, the guy that owned the shop over there in Ashland. I didn't know him when he owned his shop, but I met him at a con, and we just hit it off, and we started talking. And that's how I met Newman through Ray. Ray's a really knowledgeable historical wargamer, lots of periods, a pile of shame you wouldn't believe, bigger than mine, and Newman's put together. But he's a great guy, really got us into it. I have to throw out a few more names just when I was getting into historical wargaming. Jim Pernke, the Der Alte Fritz Journal blog.
Yep.
He was a big inspiration. And Bill Probst, his friend who does a lot of colonial gaming, they both were at the 7 Years War Convention in the South Bend, and I've been up there with those guys. And then recently, when I started getting into the Renaissance period and the Ottoman Empire and things, there's a guy, Corvinus Wargaming, that I've met recently, and he actually came to Point Pleasant and played the game with us. Very knowledgeable grad student, and speaks Polish and Ottoman and stuff, and all those four guys. But Ray was the big one. He really introduced me and got me into it.
That's awesome. What about you, Chris?
I will have to go with my dad at first.
Same, yeah.
He was big time into historical, the Civil War guns. We always had a bunch of those to shoot and things like that, and just history in general. And he never had a wargaming background or anything like that, but we just kind of developed that. But then I will say Ray for my grown up time. That was meeting him and seeing that shop and like, oh my gosh, this is when I was a kid, there was our local library had one wargaming book, and it had the Hinchcliffe 25 millimeter Napoleonics on the front, and I was like, oh my gosh, those are painted up so nice, so cool, those are so cool, and I've always wanted to do that, and finally got to do it as I got older.
That's awesome.
And I remember I grew up with all the Hinchcliffe and Ralph Partha and minifigs, and I just remember when I was younger, just oh man, it can't get any better than this. It's just so cool. And I went back the other day and looked at my minifig Romans with pointing spear and everything. Models have gotten awesome, and you guys have obviously been great painters. The one thing that's big in our area, I will say in Appalachia, that kind of helped me with the wargaming, and Chris, kind of asking you here and Jeff as well, is the reenacting, because we had so many battles near us. They did the reenactment close to where I'm from, there in Prestonsburg, and I went and did Perryville for a few years. Did you guys ever get into any of that as well, or anything like the reenacting because it's just history kind of came alive when you did that, and it was kind of cool to, oh hey, that now we're wargaming that battle.
Uh, my dad was involved with the NSSA, the North South Skirmish Association, which you dress in the appropriate attire, um, and then you go shoot the actual guns. The no blanks. They have a really nice firing line. It's amazing seeing practically a half a mile of guys just standing up. And then once they all shoot, you're wondering how in the world did they just face off against each other like that?
Yeah, I've seen
Yeah,
some
yeah,
videos
But
of that. It's impressive.
the
it's it was
cojones on
incredible.
some of those guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's I know like talking smack with my old man when we go to reenactment, or like he had a bunch of infields and flintlocks and just muskets and everything that we'd fire, and then it was be funny to like shoot the actual weapon and not hit the broadside of a barn and be like, well, hey, when you're on the tabletop, it's funny how it kind of translates, and then you can see it. Great answers. I think it's there is a common thread. It's a lot with family, but then there's a lot of things where differentiate. So I think you guys, like me and Wyndhurst, it's a very similar dynamic of how you kind of got into the hobby. And the people that Sherpa you to this day, Jeff, like what you were talking about, it's just an awesome hobby. Wyndhurst keeps talking about it, and I totally agree. Although Jeff tells me to disagree with him at sometimes, but I do agree it's an awesome hobby with a lot of people that are just encouraging. This is a really hard question. Every guest we've ever had hedges, and I'm saying it's okay to hedge. You can kind of say your honorable mentions. That's okay. But if you had to pick, game of Desert Island, what's your favorite wargaming rule set? And so we'll kick to you, Chris. That's I know you've got a lot of years in the gaming with what you've said. So like, if you had one, you can go ahead and give us some honorable mentions. Like, hey, this is up there. But if there's one that would definitely be, numero uno, let us hear that one. But yeah, feel free to put some honorable mentions that you play a lot as well.
I am not one of the rules fanatics. We have a lot of people that collect rules and different sets and everything like that. I'm just happy to play, just to finally a chance to get to play. And what, of course, I'm going to say not as my favorite, but we've played Black Powder, Fire and Fury, Fistful of Toes, and things like that. And I just, you know, I gotta say, I'm just happy to be able to play.
The biggest hedge of all time. Happy to play.
Yeah,
I love it. I love
None,
it.
yeah, just no set of rules. Okay. All right. I'll see if I can help us out, Newman. Okay. I was going to hedge a bit and say anything by Sam Mustafa, Might and Reason, those games, or Daniel Mercy, the
What
Lion
he writes
Rampage.
that World War II Rommel, right? Is that the Mustafa? Is Rommel the World War II one?
I don't know. I'm horse and musket guy, so I know
Yeah.
is that period stuff. Um, Currently, I found myself if I'm trying to put together, and now the name of the rules are escaping me. It's the Command Color Dice rules, Renatio et Gloriam. They do an Ancients Mortem et Gloriam.
Mortem
you
et
guys did
Gloriam,
before.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's the Renaissance version of that, and it looks really great. But I haven't got to play it yet. But I think that might be my new favorite. But I really enjoyed the rules we used for Point Pleasant, was this Regimental Fire and Fury.
Yeah, Sam Mustafa Rommel got huge. That's how I learned about Sam Mustafa. It's like it's kind of high scale gaming though. It's like corps or battalions or
Mm.
brigades. What's it? The other ones that you mentioned by him. What's kind of the I guess level
My,
of
they're more probably battalion level and larger. They're grand
uh,
battles.
the
He's abstracted regiments into just two stands. They're either in column or in line for like a 7 years war. So you can throw really big, huge battles with those.
the other one that you said with Mortem and Glory. I've seen it people play it as like I thought it was real big and like its own tournament scene. Is that pretty accurate or? Is it kind of scenario based? From what I've seen, it's like a l'art de guerre or something like that. It's similar to, you face off against people, and I've seen Mortem and Glory like tournaments and
Kind
stuff.
of like DBA.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not. Again, I'm just getting into it, but their marketing techniques are you buy the rules, and then they have books of army lists, and it is a points-based system. I mean, most of the stuff we do, we just throw what we have on the table or make up a scenario as we go, or do a historical one. But yeah, I could see it easily being a big tournament game.
Because I want to say Plastic Soldier Company, when they started doing it, they were, I think, selling Mortem and Glory, and I go to them for a lot of the World War II, the battle group rule set and everything, and then I saw them, and then they were doing the 3D printed armies, the Cromartie Forge or whatever it is. They were kind of like 10 or 15 millimeter, but it looked interesting. I will say that, and then. I've heard rave reviews about some of Sam's games. I've never. I think I played Rama like once. There was a buddy who put on a Battle of the Bulge game, and it was really cool. And I will say it was kind of clean in the sense that it was quick, even though you were moving larger forces. I want to say it was.
Yeah, Sam's brilliant in coming up with unique mechanics and ways he abstracts things that other people don't do. Really, really fantastic. LaSalle is his one of his.
That's right. That's the one I was thinking of too. Yep. That's the
that
one
one's really big. Yeah, but and our community is such a small community that I'm playing an online game with a guy who's works at the same university as him. So I'm like one Kevin Bacon removed from Sam Mustafa.
I'm a huge fan of Brigade Fire and Fury. Huge fan. I played hundreds of games in the 90s and early 2000s of Brigade Fire and Fury. Why do you like regimental over brigade?
Scale, just scale. I like fighting 1,000 men against 1,000 men as opposed to 20,000 against 20,000. It's just, and it's. I guess the ultimate excuse is less guys to paint. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, now that you've asked me, I don't know that I have an inherent bias towards regimental over the other one. It's just that's the one I tend to play more because it's easier to paint up a brigade broken down rather than an entire 3 corps. So
yeah,
like
and Rich Hasenhauer, I love Rich. I mean, ever since I was like 8-year-old boy and 6-year-old boy probably, and go to Historicon and stuff. Just seeing him through the ages. I love Brigade because of some of the things that you were talking about with like Sam's rules, where it was like there's a lot of stuff that's I'll say is abstract, and there's a lot of stuff that rule set gets heat for that I just love that it simplifies it, and you still get the feel of kind of the corps and brigades moving against each other. And I want to say like a stand in Brigade was 3 guys. It represents like 50 guys apiece, so it was 150 guys as a stand. So it was I think it was scaled down enough. But I'm always interested because I do find like there's some people that are, if they do like Fire and Fury, they play Regiment or they play Brigade, and I can get the idea if it's like, hey, that's what I like because I want to recreate those engagements, and especially like what I think we're going to get into with the French and Indian, the settlers and stuff. I think it probably lends itself to that, and if it gives you the clean cut. So that's just interesting. I really love Brigade, so I'm always curious on that stuff. But I'll kick it back over to Wyndhurst for the next go ahead.
Yeah. So your all's conversation made me think of a question we don't normally ask, but I'm actually really curious. Do you have a preferred scale? Because, Chris, it sounds like, at least from our previous conversation, that you're kind of, at least right now, more 28s. But Jeff, it sounds like, I guess with if you're doing regiment or brigade level, you might be doing smaller. Is it? I mean, is 28 the gold standard? Or are you guys all over the place, or do you have a preferred scale you're gaming in?
I love the 28s because coming from a model background, I love to put the extra detail in them. But also I like 6mm too. I like that micro armor scale, and then. Jeff has introduced us to the 15mm, and I prefer 28mm. If I had to do it again for Napoleonics, I might look at it like a 6mm because I like to do the big battle. Let's just do Austerlitz. Let's do the whole battle. But 15mm for what we did was really nice. I told him at one point. Said I'm glad we didn't do 28mm for Point Pleasant, or I would have the Shawnee. I would have decorated them all up. It would have been. I'd still be painting them, but.
Yeah. To answer your question, no. The pure holy scale is 25. not 28.
Throwback.
I'm
Throwback.
kidding. I've done
You're dating
like
yourself
Newman,
there.
I've done every scale. Yeah. Well, I'm in the Old Glory Army Club, so all their stuff's 25, and it makes it easy. But um, I started out in 10 mil, and everybody was like, this before this epic stuff came out. Everybody's like 10 mil, what the heck? And Pendragon and Old Glory had 10 mil stuff, so I was doing my imagination stuff in 10 mil. But if I'm doing smaller scale things like pike and shot stuff, where well, that's not talk to Yorkshire. That's not small scale, but if I'm going to field maybe 100 figures aside, 28's fine, and you can put the detail in and make them look nice, and you can get crazy and paint eyeballs if you want. I generally don't, only on commanders, but. The 15 mil I had to get used to again. I did 15 mil for a while, but after painting these 25s, going back to 15, now I'm still trying to paint them with the same level of detail as a 28, and that's just maddening. So now I'm having to just push the contrast, make them pop, yada yada. But I'm sorry, I'm getting on a tangent.
No, it's good.
No.
28's great, and they all serve their purposes. If you want Austerlitz, you do it in 10 or 6, so you can field a huge force, and it looks fantastic. But you're not going to fight a skirmish in 10 or 6, because then you've got 4 stands on the table. So if you're going to do 28, the skirmish games are great in 28, because then you can build the scale. But the problem is, if you don't really pick a scale, you have to build terrain in all those scales.
Right.
So that's insane, So sometimes you can use a tree in the 15 and 25, and it's a small tree, but that's when we get into more into discussion on why we chose 15 millimeter for the scale and things, we can talk more about it. But it's just the scale just needs to fit your intentions and the scale of what you're fighting. If you're going to do American War of Independence, I'd say 15-10, or of course you could almost do a 1-to-1 on these smaller things. But if you want, I don't know. It just depends on how much time you want to spend painting, how much you want them to look like, yada yada. So.
I was just curious because Kentuckian and I are always talking about, like, he's got multiple armies, the same armies in multiple scales, and I had always been a 28, or except for my moderns. Moderns was in 20 because that was the only thing you could get them in, and I was like, I'm never going to do smaller than 20, and then I got gifted a whole bunch of epic, and I was like, well, I guess I'm doing those, and then it's like, man, I really like to do like Cold War Gone Hot, like Team Inky, but in anything larger than like micro armor, it turns into a parking lot. So I've kind of learned, because I started in 28 almost exclusively. So it's like whatever I was going to do is being 28. So I was just curious, so I'll be interested in that conversation when we talk about Point Pleasant, like how you came to that. I don't think it's something we've normally ever asked any of our guests.
Yeah, I'm gonna add it, Wyndhurst. It's a great question. I think it really rings true. And I know there's a lot of hobbyists that, unfortunately, you start something in one scale and you're like, hey, I want to game this facet of it. It's always, the grass is greener in the next yard. And me and Wyndhurst played the Battle of Ascalon. I have Pyrrhic and Roman armies in that period. Lots of stands and everything in 6 mil, and then I'm going to recreate it in 28 mil. So it's just, there's some psychotic parts of it as well. Just stupid, I'll say.
Well, one more thing I'll say, and then we can move on. The scale you pick, like if you're going to be a 28 mil guy, I often find that it's great. You start with a skirmish level battle, and you paint up your 20 guys aside, and you play the skirmish game for a while. And while you're playing that and loving that, then you slowly build up your units to a large skirmish, and then you build up to the larger battles. The only drawback is when you get those really big battles, you've got to have those really big tables in 28. So there's size restrictions. So if I'm living in New York in an apartment, I'm going to be a 10, 15 mil guy, 6 mil guy all the way. So I think it really is just whatever scale works for you in your surroundings.
Yeah.
There's a lot of truth to what you said too, in like the painting process, because both me and Wyndhurst are like living proof of. I had all my ancient armies and Old Glory and stuff done in metal, and then with the military moves, I was like, I got to go to plastic. While I was at Fort Bragg, people were playing Clash of Spears Ancient, so I was like, oh, Vitrix models are amazing. Started doing that, and then it just grew to where, okay, I'm going to have full-grown Hail Caesar armies. And then I think Wyndhurst is kind of the same with his Dark Age stuff.
Yeah.
It kind of started as like Saga
Yep.
armies and then grew to so it does grow legs. But I think it's a really great point, and I think it's an interesting question. And yeah, I love your guys' responses, Jeff and Chris, on that. I'll go ahead and ask the next question, and we'll keep rolling through. This one again, hedge if you want. My guess is it's going to be Napoleonics for Chris and French and Indian for Jeff. Let's see if I'm right. You know, I'm going to Johnny Carson it. So let's see if I'm right. What is your favorite period? I'll go back to Jeff on this one. What's your favorite period? So kind of war game. You can super hedge and say the imaginary imagination one and be like, that's my favorite. But
No, my horse and musket. I know that's
horse
a
and
large
musket.
period. That is from, you know, the Hussites fighting with knights, you know, with the early gunpowder up until, you know, colonial Sudan, things like that. So I've played Sudan, Napoleonic, Civil War, more exotic. I'm love, but if you have to pick a general area, I would say Renaissance is my favorite. Pike and shot.
I
Big
saw
pike.
you paint some Janissaries, I want to say not too long ago as well, I think. So
Mhm.
you've got pretty healthy collection. How many armies do you think you have in the Pike and Shot, regardless of scale? Just 20, half a dozen? How many armies?
Half a dozen. I have
Half dozen.
Ottomans, Polish. You got to have winged hussars if you're going to do that period.
Yep. Yep.
Um, then also basically lands connects, and you know there was a lot of mercenaries, so it's easy to make up mercenary companies to field. So, but yeah, half a dozen, not that many,
There's
and different scales too. Well, that's the problem.
There's a Polish, I think he's got Polish lineage. Adrian, he's a professor at Moorhead State, and he does a lot with the by fire and sword, which is, I think, a rule set gaming on that period.
Yeah.
But man, that sounds like you guys would be speaking the same language. Chris, moving over to you now, or Newman, moving over to you now on, what's you got to if you want to hedge again, totally. My guess is Napoleonics, but we'll see. What's your favorite period?
It is Napoleonics. I'm committed to that one pretty well. I just enjoy painting the uniforms from a. I like World War II, early war desert, the early Africa Corps and Eighth Army and the Italians, but it's definitely Napoleonics.
I,
It's
I
it.
I've
Oh,
seen
I
some
was
of
going
your I've seen some of your painting, and it's awesome. And I mean, you've been knocking out
to appreciate
regiments
that.
and posting them on the Ashland page. I want to say I saw some of the games you guys posted up there, and that's impressive. And doing that in 28 millimeter, my hats off to you, man. That's psychotic as well. But
Yeah, I love that they do it in 28 millimeter because I can paint up a bunch of Spanish militia and
white,
throw them in
white.
there. The weird stuff. They paint the big blocks. I'll paint the weird stuff.
But that's awesome. I'll kick it back over to Wyndhurst for the next question as we keep rolling through
Yeah.
these.
So we're always interested to see if you have a favorite model or unit, and that can be difficult, kind of to say like either it's your favorite that you just painted and you're the most proud of, or it's your favorite that if you have the opportunity to get it on the table, regardless if it makes sense or it's the right choice, you're going to try and get it on the table. Chris, do you have a unit that meets those parameters?
Yes, I do. I have a unit of dismounted French dragoons that somehow end up in the hottest part of the fighting. They
Hell
never
yeah.
falter. They have
Hell,
never ever faltered. They are heroes of France.
that's awesome.
When you do dragoons, do you also do you have them mounted and dismounted, and then will you leave horses with holders and everything? Do you go to that
I
level?
will eventually. I will eventually, but I have the Perry dismounted dragoons, and then I ordered a couple of for the command and the bugler and the flag bearer. They're mounted, but everybody else is dismounted. And somehow, some way, it started as a joke. They ended up in the main part of the fighting, and they've ever since they have never faltered. They are
They
they are
kick
awesome.
That's
They
cool.
kick butt. I like. They're so veteran. They've all had their horses shot out once them, so they're walking to the battle.
What about you, Jeff?
I meant to bring him. I didn't. I
Oh.
didn't. My favorite figure that I've ever painted is a very angry Cossack priest.
Ooh.
He's standing there with his fist raised up and he's yelling, and I love that thing. And it can go. He could go all the way up to World War One, or the Bolshevik Revolution, and all the way back to medieval times. So that little dude can show up anywhere, and he just screams at everybody. It's my favorite, and I'm not that great at painting black, but Ruben Torregusa gave me a technique on highlighting black with hot pink, and it worked
Oh,
so
wow.
well.
Wow.
You've got to check it out. His Heresy Brush is the name of his site, and if you mix the Viejo hot pink in with black, it makes this gray that just it's beautiful. It's a lovely. It gives it a slight purplish tint to it, and it just makes it look fantastic. But yeah, that's
Gotta
my
do
favorite.
that.
And then I have a Cossack cavalry that's goes along with them. So those are my favorite. The Cossacks are just wonderful things to paint. They're fun.
I love having character models or like vignettes on the table that just add character. And when I did for one of the bolt action tournaments, Kentuckian was running, I painted a German cameraman. Like he's standing there holding a camera, and I just had him following the officer, and he's not actually there, but now he's on every World War II table I do. He's got to be with Germans. He's always there following the officer around. In one of the last demo games, it's like, do you want your officer to charge at that full unit and fire his, SMG? It's like the cameraman's there to make good propaganda, and it like almost encourages players to be silly because the cameraman's there filming them. That's I like. I like those characters that I think they don't always have to have effects in the game, but they can always add such flavor. I feel like so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's anything. That's what makes the table pop, and sometimes it's most memorable. So I'm sure people, fighting for the Holy Roman Empire, or wherever else, are cursing that Cossack priest. But the moving on to the next question, because we're still getting in through the questions, and I know the audience and viewers getting to know you guys by now, old hats. This question, a little bit, you can go the nostalgic route. You can go kind of the best one with your friends. What is the best war game you've ever played? Not just the rule set, but asking about the actual game, players, table time, playing the Battle of Rorke's Drift, a salute, playing, at Historicon, or, you and all your buddies get through and it was the final battle of the campaign. You had the right Cheeto dust on your hands, the dice were hot, or, those famous stories where the Minutemen with the British regulars, just it was by chance, or the Texans win the Alamo. Like, we have a lot of examples. Wyndhurst always uses he had a 4th of July game in England with a bunch of
Brits.
a bunch of people still loyal to the king. So it was great. But kind of like, looking at that, I'll move to you, Newman, on this one. Like, what's your most memorable kind of favorite war game you've ever played?
Hands down, and it's a board game. I'll have to say, but on the way back from Desert Storm, we were on the USS Tarawa, a helicopter ship, and we didn't really have a lot to do. And board Marines, always,
Trouble,
big trouble.
UCMJ, yeah.
So somebody had donated a whole bunch of board games to the ship, and there was Risk, and we played Risk until we couldn't play Risk anymore. And then we found out that a lot of us loved Axis and Allies. So I drew on the back of the Risk board, I had paper, and I drew the Axis and Allies map. And we used the one army Risk guys as infantry, the big 10 as tanks, and then I drew all the rest. And that, on the way back from the war, that was something else. And the dumbest thing that I ever did was when we were shy of San Diego and we were cleaning the ship up, as I threw it away, and I should have kept it.
I should go to a museum.
Heartbreaking. What about you, Jeff?
My most memorable war game ever, and I'll keep things anonymous. I drove a very long distance to a certain convention where I had painted up a 72-man, 28 millimeter 7 Years War Bavarian regiment to play specifically in this very large game. I got there. They said, okay, you set up your guys there. They had 3 20-foot tables with gaps between. And the very first turn, my guys are sitting there on the left flank. I see one of the guys from the other side come up to the referee and say, I think I've got a flank charge on that unit. He goes, oh, yeah, yeah. And they wiped my unit that I'd spent months painting off the board in the first turn with a guy that didn't know the rules, that never played on the separate tables. It was the most heart-wrenching experience I've ever had as a war gamer. So that's what you don't do as a game master. You don't put the new guy in a vulnerable position to wipe him out because he won't play it again.
Yeah.
So I need to sell those. I still have them. I don't know why I haven't sold them.
Bad luck.
That is the most memorable game. We've never had a guest take that approach, but
It's a good lessons learned, though.
Yeah, that's a
Well, I've played so many great ones that I would feel that I would slight someone if I picked one great game.
Yeah, no, well said. I'll kick it back to Wyndhurst for the next question.
Let's see.
8.
Yeah, so I feel like we've kind of talked about this one, but if there's anything you want to add, we'd like to know how people transition. So I know, Jeff, you started with D&D. That was very similar to me. I started in D&D and then discovered that models existed. And Chris, I know you were kind of introduced because you guys bought models and stuff. But was there anything unique or special from that transition? Because Jeff, I know you said you started with kind of like Warhammer stuff as well, and then went into historicals. But if you want to share anything that we haven't already covered about that kind of transition, more towards like the historical.
When you answer Wyndhurst's question, I'd say roll 9 up into it. I'd say kind of. What do you play nowadays?
Yeah.
Kind of let everybody know.
Okay. So I think we as wargamers get caught up in the new fancy figure and then we shift periods constantly. So just on my most recent journey I saw Coruscant Miniatures had 100 Years War line out, and Perry had 100 Years War line out. And I'm like, oh, well, I should play the 100 Years War. So I bought some miniatures for that. And then while I was playing the 100 Years War, I saw that they had a Netflix movie of Vlad Tempest against the Ottomans. I'm like, well, that's close. So maybe I should get some Transylvanians or some Wallachians and some Ottomans. And then the Ottomans were so sexy. I'm like, oh, I don't even like the Transylvanians anymore. I like the Ottomans. I painted up the Ottomans, got some war wagons. Who could they fight? The Hungarians? Nah, the Polish. Polish, wing hussars, huzzah. So now I've got Polish and the Ottomans. And from that, I'm fighting and I said, well, the Poles need the battle I was doing, they had some German pikemen. German pikemen, that's cool. And then I went down a rabbit hole in the Cologne Wars, which I've never heard of anyone playing. But the Archbishop is thrown out of, because he married a Protestant woman, yada yada. So now I've got all these wars of religion, and that's where I'm at this point. And now I'm thinking Italian wars because that's pikemen. So it's just one after the other. So what am I playing now? I'm playing French and Indian War, which has nothing to do with the rest of it.
Good segue. Yeah.
Badger Games Space Station Zero, which is a sci-fi game. And I'm starting to flirt with the Italian wars, but I think I'm going to stay focused on my wars of religion stuff. So there's where I'm at.
That's
nice.
Awesome.
What about you, Chris?
Yeah.
I've always been historical. I've had a lot of friends that have played the Warhammer and various Star Treks and Star Wars and all that. Nothing against it or anything like that. I'm a big Star Wars fan, but everything of mine has always been historical. And once I got into Napoleonics, I held on to that. Did paint up that I have a ton of micro armor, and that needs to be painted up. But I've got my Panzer Army Africa painted, and going into the 15 millimeter French and Indian War, that was kind of a breath of fresh air. Being able to do the small units, no cavalry, no artillery. It's just light infantry tactics, and that has been nice. So I guess that's my turn right there.
Hey, can I throw something in here too? Have you guys done naval combat, naval miniatures?
A little bit.
There was a few times that I played like one of my good gaming buddies, my dad's friend, Bob Moon. He's real big at the 7 Years War Convention. He does 40 mils now, but he would always do some crazy like the thing against the Mikasa, and he did like some Phantom scenarios. I got real big into. I played Cruel Seas just a little bit. I don't really consider that naval. It's more beer and pretzels. But the Mongoose rule set that they came out with, the name's escaping me. Warlord basically has Mongoose's rule set, and I have basically everything to do midway, and so I've done it in kind of that period. We thought about. I had a friend that was trying to get into Actium, but I don't remember like the rules being inviting. I've seen on like the Wargame Soldiers and Strategy that new rule set with like the 3D printed models where it's ancient naval. I can't say I've played that before, but I do some naval. I'm just not super heavy into it.
Yeah,
I've go ahead.
I started one of my earliest war games, if you can call it a war game, was the collectible, constructible pirates. You came in like car packs, and I actually have nearly 100 ships, if not more, because I bought a whole bunch of like unsold stuff to help get my kids interested into it. And then I'm like, now I've got Age of Sail rules because I've got all these sail ships that's like, well, let me try some naval war games. And I've got a bunch of not Cruel Seas. What's the large scale fleet size, not the PT boats?
That's the Mongoose one, the rule set. For whatever reason, the name's escaping me. I have it right here. Go ahead, keep talking.
The Axis and Allies naval game was another early game for me, and I've gotten like one of the old starter sets, and I've got some of the Warlord stuff because I thought it'd be a really good game to introduce people into wargaming who might be interested in naval stuff. But I don't have any of it painted, so yeah, I think both of us are kind of like very low entry level. I've actually, a bit of a spoiler, I pushed it to Kentuckian actually this week saying, hey, for a 2026 episode, we should talk about naval wargaming.
There you go.
Victory at Seas is what
Victory
it's called.
Seas,
But
yeah.
it's the old Mongoose rule set, and a bunch of us started playing it because Warlord does things pretty cheap for the most part. They have some pretty expensive ships, and they're good if you want to kind of get a smattering in that. One of the things we did is we found that the Midway and all that stuff has like heavy airplane battles, and we found some of their stands were really expensive, and so this is the entire American Air Force or Japanese Air Force, and what I'm showing listener is the stands to it. So we had that, we had the ships, and got the Arizona and everything, so we could do like we were doing Pearl Harbor and all of that, and it was a points-based rule set. The Mongoose rule set is really easy, so I'll say there's if it's something, Jeff, it sounds like you're going to tell us some kind of naval games that you played, but it's not something that I have like a immense domain knowledge for. And the Mongoose rule set like allowed you to kind of go to a pretty, I will say, in-depth analysis. It had the different types of torpedoes. It had that. And so we had a friend in our gaming group. We all got the navies, and we had these huge navy fights, and we do them on 6x4s and everything. And then there was a friend that just you had somebody abuse it and would always use the super fast long range torpedoes. Everybody's like, I don't want to play this anymore. Like you get just destroyed. But it was a lot of fun. It's a good game. I recommend that one. But I can't say I'm an expert in the field. What were your thoughts on it, Jeff? Though, is that something you do or?
No, I was just curious because listening to your previous podcast and other podcasts, portion of the hobby, it's really neat, the little ships and the tactics, but you just don't see it as often, and I've not heard anyone ever refer to a naval game as their favorite. I'm sure in the comments somebody will be like, oh no, you're wrong, the naval this, that, but yeah. I would love to see more or experience that, and I didn't know what your guys' background was on that because I haven't heard you talk about naval stuff. I know Wyndhurst has a giant ship he's going to be painting.
Yeah. Well, I feel like of the two types of wargamers you tend to find, there's ones like most, like the four of us, who play a spattering of things. And then you run into individuals who they only play this one thing. And in my experience, a lot of those who are really into naval wargaming, that's all they mostly play.
Are the aerodrome guys the same camp, you think? They just play the airplanes?
Well, we have some of that. Like I think the Blue Max and some of those rule sets, even from like the chit ones you've talked about, like were pretty good. There's some great rule sets out there. Wyndhurst got me into the Wings of War one that was really simple. I hope whoever the company is brings it back. The Blood Red Skies is a great rule set. To push back against Newman, Newman's kind of like a unicorn here because a lot of the Napoleonic wargamers I've seen, like
That's all they do.
because of all of the armies and the periods, you can't do a lot else, and so Newman kind of is even branched from there. I like to get in and I have a lot of old glory. Grew up playing Napoleon's battles, but it is something like once you reach in the history, and to your point about the Ottoman Empire and all of your kind of collecting the armies, it's so easy to like, oh, well, I want to buy French and bicorns and do like some of the Italian stuff, and then now I'm going to do this, and like it's not a huge lift, and then the next thing you know, you've got everything from the early, late 17, 90s all the way up to 1815, and so I don't know. I'll say that I do a lot of wargaming. It's not something that I have a super big passion for about the naval, but if anybody is like, um, I think if you like kind of the okay depth and maybe a little bit more than that, I think Victory at Seas is a great rule book for somebody to pick up. And the armies are pretty cheap, and a lot of people are 3D printing them anyways. And it's very in depth with the way submarines and that stuff works of World War II. I never gave the War Game Soldiers and Strategy or War Games Illustrated, whatever it is, the rule set where it was the ancient ships that I saw that you could like 3D print, and there were people that were putting on Actium and like tire and some other things. I think that looks super cool. It's not something I'm super passionate about. I'm got the Roman lineage. I just want to come and sack Syracuse, and they can do whatever with their ships.
Yeah, I think.
But no, it's an interesting point.
Yeah, I think we'll plan on doing an episode about naval wargaming because I feel like it fits, and I know we're totally sidetracking right now.
Yep.
It fits a niche between, I think, board gaming or like the chit and counter and more traditional wargaming because of the lack or the lower amount of scenery and detail. Because your ships are small, a lot of them are open ocean, or you've got coastlines and some small islands. And so they tend to be a lot more technical sets of rules. And I feel like it's one of those niches in the hobby. But that is something that I have thought of recently. It's like we haven't talked about it much. We haven't had guests, and it is something I'd like us to dive into because I've got stuff I need an excuse to paint. But yeah, so foreshadowing, we'll probably in 2026 have one or two episodes about naval wargaming.
And we've had a great, robust conversation. I think getting to know you guys. So we're gonna move into the topic.
Moving on swiftly.
Listener and viewers, an hour in, they're like, finally. But no, I think everybody who now Jeffrey, Newman. I still want to say it like the Seinfeld episode, Newman. But the your old hats at the hobby, and so that's pretty awesome. But now we want to get into kind of the purpose of this episode, an hour in, and talk a little bit kind of like what leads to this. Battle of Point Pleasant, just like we talked about in the intro. So I think it's important to note we want to ask these questions specifically about your process in the Battle of Point Pleasant, but we also want to kind of tease out how others may do or replicate this for another battle of engagement. And so we have this outline that we wanted to talk about. And we're gonna pivot while we're doing it. So we're gonna talk about specifically for the project, and we're gonna talk about like kind of other things or even side projects you've had that mirror this. And if you want to like foreshadow a little bit with your next project, but specifically the intro is the inspiration for the project. You guys have talked about kind of what you're rooted in, whether it be the Wars of Religions, Pike and Shot, Napoleonics, and those things. Where did the inspiration and I won't divulge how I figured that out. You guys did the Step Brothers episode where it's like, did we just become best friends? You want to battle Point Pleasant? But I'll kick it over. We'll start with Jeff on kind of inspiration for the project.
The inspiration for the Battle of Point Pleasant project was there is a flood wall in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where they have a huge mural of the battle painted on it. And I went up there to their celebration where they murder Chief Cornstalk every year in May, and saw that flood wall. And this was back in 2010, and wrote on my blog, this would be cool to do. And that was the end of it. Never thought about it much again. This year for my birthday, I had Newman and Ray over to play a game, and we're sitting there, we're talking, and then we get into the realm of, hey, what battles would you like to do? And Newman goes, well, I'm up there in Mason County, and I've always wanted to do the Battle of Point Pleasant, and it's Step Brothers moment. And I go, I've always wanted to do the Battle of Point Pleasant, and Ray goes, "You guys are dumb," because he didn't know anything about the battle. It was like 10 guys fighting each other. We go, no. We started talking about it, and Newman goes, "Oh yeah, we should do it." And then he puts a caveat on it. And they have battle days every year in October. We'll go up there and play the battle at the battle days. And of course, I'm like, "Oh yeah, sounds great. We've got 4 months, you know." But yeah, that's how I remember it getting started. You might remember different, Chris.
120 days, Chris. That's all we got to paint all these models, the terrain, and do everything. Let's go.
It seemed like a good idea. No, I got the inspiration because I work there. I work for a major delivery company, and my route is Point Pleasant and the rural areas around it. And every year they have the battle days, and they have a lot of reenactors show up. And I'm always like, man, we should do this as a because it's right here. We live here. We're only 45 minutes from the battle site, and it's not Austerlitz. It's not the Battle of Moscow. Anything like that. We're right here. And when Hawkeye turns around and says, go to Kentucky, that's right there. That's
Yeah.
This is where we live. And so that was my inspiration for it.
But
Always
you
seeing
guys,
the reenactors and just driving around, and you can look into the woods and just imagine the militia and the Shawnee just walking through the woods like that. It's a neat place.
Appalachia's beautiful, I think, personally, especially in the fall and stuff.
Oh, it
And
is.
you guys have like subliminal messaging is kind of probably the inspiration for the project too, because you've been in the area, you know battle days. How many of each one of you kind of gone to the battle days or to that kind of event up there? Dozens, in your lifetime, or a lot at least. Jeff's like, no, not at all, not once. Uh,
Ask me again. How many times have I been to battle days?
how many times have you been to battle days?
One time.
That was
To
to
put
run
on
the
the
game.
To put on the game.
So Jeff's kind of getting dragged by the ankles. That's what Jeff's kind
No,
of.
no, no. Wait. Now ask Newman how many times he's been to battle days.
He's gonna say one.
Every single time. At
Okay.
least, up there delivering, just driving by. And we took the boys up there when they were younger uh, a few times, and it's kind of neat to see the fort and then see the battle site and everybody running around in loincloths and things like that. But
Well,
it's pretty neat.
I think it's something that's lost on wargamers. When you grow up near an area, I always throw rocks at people that are in Europe and stuff. When I went to Athens and everything, like they just don't know what they have around them and kind of be inspired. And so I think
Oh,
it's the same true. Like I haven't gone to most, I'll say, Civil War skirmishes and French and Indian battlefields around our area, but it's not something once you start appreciating, you're like, man, this is right where it's at. So that's pretty awesome. And it sounds like the inspiration. Regardless if you went to battle days or not, you're in the area. You look out into the woods out there, and feel like you can easily kind of travel back in time, whether you're looking at ruins,
exactly.
if you're in Europe or anything else. So that's pretty awesome. It's a good, I think, inspiration to kind of pivot towards other people. It can come from all around you, and we really, one of the kind of key points of this episode is people that are trying to take something maybe that's around them. And there's all these great scenario books, like we talked about, that do major battles. You can find a million scenario books, different rule sets that do Hastings, that do Agincourt, that do, the Somme or anything else like that. But there's stuff in your area where it's like, hey, these are leaders that are tied to this area or where I'm from, and they've had different types of points. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but I just think it's cool.
Yeah,
And
and
especially,
inspiration wise, you know, there's some perception too, because like our friend Ray lives close as well, but he thought it was just a little tiny 12 on 12 thing. And once we started developing it, playing it, and getting guys involved, he was like, "Oh, this is a much bigger battle than I thought it was." So if you've got a small battlefield near you and you don't know anything about it, just go check it out. Maybe it may inspire you just to go see where the guys were fighting.
a great example of that is the down a little bit from you guys in Prestonsburg, that skirmish where now the statue of Lincoln sits from the Kahn law firm when it went under, is like a wing kind of tied into Perryville and Chaplain Hills and kind of the line north and south line that was fractioning. So I really didn't even understand that as part of growing up near that skirmish until going through it as a wargamer and looking into it. That's super awesome. I'll kick it over to Wyndhurst for the next question as we kind of dive into this.
Yeah, I have to confess, I didn't know much about this project until Kentuckian brought it to my attention as a possible topic, and I was immediately jumping on board because, and you talk about the inspiration of something being near you, and I personally want to know your all's thoughts on these questions because, like, here at Ellsworth, we've got 3 of the 4 Doolittle raid squadrons assigned here. Now, they didn't start here, but I was like, man, that's awesome. And every year on the anniversary, they have a big like event day, and I was like, sounds like a perfect opportunity to run a Doolittle raids game. And so, like, the same kind of idea is like it's something that's near me and now inspiring me. And so, like, Jeff, you mentioned, also about kind of that, sounds like the beginning of our next question, that research phase. Like, how do you learn about it? So I kind of want to break this into 2 parts. What kind of ways did you all go to about researching it that you can recommend for other people? And then based off your research, how did that affect how you want to do the game? Because even in my limited, it's like, okay, well, your research might lend itself. It's like, well, it might be hard to play this as a war game unless you do this, that, or the other. How did that, with the wargamer's mindset, how did you go about researching it, and how did that influence your all's decisions?
I'll start out. Is that okay, Chris? Yeah. Okay. So the way we started with the research was Chris had the Osprey book on the Battle of Point Pleasant. So we were fortunate enough that there was a little bit of something out there. From the museum up there, I also purchased a book called A Point in History by John G. Morgan. And it had some more colorful things, so you were able to add a little bit of color to the battle. You could put some event cards in or something like that if you wanted to represent some of that things. Then also, there's always, every wargamer's first dive into a period, go on Facebook, go on YouTube, and just Google Battle of Point Pleasant. And while I was doing that, I found some lectures by Dr. Glenn F. Williams from the military academy talking about it. He was talking about all of Lord Dunmore's war, but this is the only real battle in Lord Dunmore's war, so it was pretty featured. And then also, not as important, I think, but a good source was Dan Cutler, who performs as Chief Cornstalk, who was the leading native general. And listening to him do things on public radio and stuff, and I actually got to meet him at the event. So the research you start out macro to micro, right? You jump on the internet, you go to Wikipedia, then you find some wargaming groups if anybody else has done it. We found out a friend of ours had done the battle in it previously, and talk to them about that, and they just kind of keep working until you can figure out your order of battle, how many people were there, then how you break it out into units to the war games that you're choosing, etc. So did that answer the first part?
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of answered both parts, honestly.
Okay.
Newman, what are your thoughts on that, like research for the project?
That was that's pretty much my whole view on it. I had gotten the Osprey book. I was excited to see that there was an Osprey book on the battle.
That is impressive.
Yeah.
And the 250th anniversary was actually the year before, and so we missed that. But just doing a little bit of the research, like he was saying online. There's YouTube videos on it, and just trying to get what may have happened, what really happened, and things like that. And then Jeff produced a really great scenario and setup for that battle. It was really nice.
So my caveat to that is the research. I'm finding this in my ancients, and I think anybody will find this. Like even in World War II or modern, if you're doing it, just like you said, you can go to YouTube channels, you can go to these things, you can go to, you're trying to. I feel like in that part of it, you guys are doing what you're getting after it, and it's like, hey, I'm gonna try to get every resource I can. I'm gonna add flair. There's a historical account. But sometimes, you find the research has some gaping holes, or worse yet, like contradictions. In a lot of these ancient battles, hey, the Roman plume on the helmet's purple, or no, it's black. And, I'm going back to Livy and Plutarch, and I'm like, okay, which one do I go with? For me,
That's aesthetics. Who cares about aesthetics?
well, but for me, there's like this rule of cool where I'll say the rule of cool comes out, and whether it's a narrative of like I made a Cato and some of the senators for my Pompeian army when I finally get to it, but there's like, hey, I really want to still tell a story, and I think as a wargamer, sometimes you're telling a story whether you're making that person play in there. Can you talk about anything if you encountered them where it was like maybe there's a contradiction or maybe there's 2 points that are at opposition with each other, but this is the reason Jeff and Chris kind of went this route. You picked this one over the other. Maybe there was in one account there's a company of Mingo warriors, and another account it's like less than that, or this is why we decided on that number. Here's how we handled some things on contradiction. Either we went with what we thought was the best educated guess, we went with the rule of cool, we went with, hey, this is going to make a little bit of a better scenario. Did you encounter any of those things in your research, and like how did you deal with that?
Before you answer, I'd like to add, so like in my research for the dual raid, like apparently they stripped all the weapons off the aircraft. So that's not going to make for a very interesting game. So we're also kind of like what Kentuckian's saying, is there anything that you felt like, were there units in the area but they didn't engage, that we're going to, like, you changed history a little bit to make it a game? I think that kind of adds into kind of Kentuckian's question a little bit, like differences, discrepancies, or things like, well, if they had just been like 10 minutes difference that, they might have been there, that you found in your research that you might have changed.
So, the one of the large discrepancies in the historical data for the fight is where there's 700 Native Americans or where they're closer to 1,000. So I went with a general consensus and put it at 700, and broke it out by different Shawnees. So they didn't have really the organizational tactics of the natives isn't like a military unit. You don't have a platoon that lines up and does things. They're kind of fighting in loose groups. So we had to organize them in certain ways. So choosing the organization, how we broke it out, choosing if we were going to use more than one general. The Shawnee had 7 leaders there. But, do you field all 7 leaders, which makes your command and control of the natives, like a Napoleonic battle, or do you reduce it to leaders to make it a little more chaotic? The scenario itself, the colonials are basically ambushed and pretty much just push back. To make it an interesting war game, we had to let a little more tension in there. So at one point, one of the sources said that a bunch of the natives got excited because they were causing casualties, and they just jumped into the creek and started going down that way. So we put a random roll of how many of the natives from what unit would leave. So that kind of, there's some little points in there. But as far as modeling for the historical, when you put it into a war games rule, the battle was chaos. It's happening before the sun's up. It's foggy. And there weren't that many casualties. So how do you emulate that in a war game? If you've got 200 guys firing at 150 guys and you roll, you're going to get a bunch of casualties. You can put modifiers, and the Regimental Fire and Fury AWI rules had some good modifiers. It kept the casualties manageable. I think the natives, they got a quarter of the militia wounded. So that actually became a victory condition. Can you do historically better than the natives did? Can you do more than 250 casualties? So incorporating the history to me was easier than finding. There weren't a lot of conflicts. The main one was how many of the natives there actually were, and I aired a little heavy, just make it a more balanced fight, because there was only 1,000 militia. So 700 to 1,000 with the element of surprise, and that initial ambush kind of thins them out at the beginning. Those are the kind of things we had to look at to decide how to set up the scenario. But in other historical scenarios, if you get run into conflict, the way I generally deal with it is during play testing, try to figure it out. So play testing is very important in a historical scenario that's not written by somebody already. Mm-hmm. You got to play test it, and you're always going to have that one friend who says, well, I'm going to just do this crazy thing, and you've never thought of it, and then you've got to deal with that guy. When Newman and Ray tested it the first time, I tested it by myself like 3 or 4 times and was getting similar outcomes. Newman had those natives running. I mean, they were just flying past militia, shooting them from both sides. I was going, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy!" But it still ended up being a manageable game.
Well,
It was interesting. I hope that
That's
answered the question. I get a little
yeah, that
talky.
was
no. I think that's perfect. Newman, what do you have to add about that? Were you trying to, when you did that, Newman? I think because you guys were still playtesting it, were you trying to break it, to kind of stress it in that way as well?
yes. I was trying to do something that wasn't done that day, and I thought passing up the smaller units and letting my larger my dog just ran him. Anyway, letting the larger units take care of the smaller units as I bypassed them was going to pay off, and it did there for a while, and then until it didn't. But
Don't let him lie to you. He was yelling Zulu the whole time. He was horns of the buffalo in it.
that's pretty much well it. Now that little part about the going into the creek, that was really interesting because there were guys that I did not expect to lose, and because once they went into the creek and down to where the boat flatboats were and everything like that, I did not have really command and control of those guys. So that was interesting to lose those. But another thing was when you were saying were there any extra units, but no, or any, that would have been around. That was pretty much well all there was that day. There was Lord Dunmore's guys, but they were on what they didn't get there for a good while after the battle, and they
Yeah,
were
he had
marching that
another
direction
call of
too.
them of about 1,000 troops,
Mhm.
but they were very far north, heading towards the Pittsburgh area.
Okay.
So
The Virginia militia walked all the way across. They marched all the way across West Virginia. that's, that's
yeah,
quite the you get down around those mountains around Beckley and past Charleston, and that's something else. But
That's rough.
yeah,
Yeah, they're not wearing boots either, so that's that's
uh,
a rough
So
march.
on
The
another, I have another
Go ahead.
question on research, and Chris, I want you to lead this because you've been to a lot of the battles reenactments. But how much focus did you all put on the actual geography of the location, having such easy access to it?
Jeff did a really great job on the board. He got a autumn mat, and then we did autumn trees, and we got some feedback that apparently that's not done very often in wargaming. Everybody just does spring, summer, and just calls it at
Yep.
that. And but that board looked amazing in with the autumn colors, and he had the creek. So it was pretty close to what would have been there at the time. Yeah.
yeah, we had to abstract some things because the battlefield was several miles long, and we're on a six
Yeah.
by four table. So the high ridge was, within X amount of moves of the militia instead of because they fought from 5 in the morning until 6 in the evening. So there was a slow push miles. So we had to abstract some of that, and we had to abstract the square footage for the camp. And on a new scenario that we're doing, people have asked questions. Do you build like we're building Fort Necessity? Do you build your fort to model scale so that the number
Looks
of guys fit
accurate.
it,
Yeah.
or do you do it for the footprint of the building? So your fort's only it's a 6 by 6 instead of being able to fit everybody in it. So there's that abstraction you have to do. In a perfect world, we would have had two 6 foot long tables, but then
Yeah.
you'd have to scale the movement different. So it's just remember at the end of the day, there were two things we were focused on. One was the education, so that we could present basically a diorama of the beginning of the battle. Because on the first day, they brought in like 600 grade school kids and middle school kids, and they would go around to each station, and then one guy was Davy Crockett, and one guy would shoot the cannon, yada yada yada. And on our station, we had it set up, and we used it kind of as a teaching diorama, like in a museum, and walk through the battle. Here's the ambush. Here's where Colonel Lewis dies. Here's this, that, and that. Now these guys are coming up, and kind of set it up. We didn't play it for the kids. We just kind of used it as a guide. So that was rule one. Rule two, or goal two, was to make an interesting game. It was. When we first started talking about it, I was like, The natives kill a bunch of guys, then they get overwhelmed. It doesn't sound like that interesting of a scenario, but you add the forest, the vision, the creek, some other, moments. It's replayable, but the first time you play it, and Colonel Lewis dies the first turn, the second somebody gets shot, you're like, oh, I'm down a leader. What? This really happened. We tried to emulate the chaos of it, so there's very little command and control, and that was the second goal, to make an interesting scenario. So as far as the topography, we had a topographic map of the region, could have made it exact, but we probably would have needed to go down to 6 mil, and that loses some of the visual impact for the kids. We wanted to make them, all the kids like to pick them up and go, oh, look at that war paint. Newman's just a madman painting, all this detail. So
that's where, and I think we're going to get into some of that. I really like it because we're touching on some of it now, but I just think it's awesome that you guys did that. And I want to get into, our next kind of swipe at this is going to be rule set and kind of special scenario rules. I want to set the stage with this because I've seen people when I talk to people, and my classmates, my friends, or anything else that I try to get into wargaming, they're like, so you're just going to set up, the same thing that happened with kind of the same results. And, I'm not opposed to historical simulations. It's cool sometimes, especially when they're close. And it sounds like you guys didn't have to put your foot on the scales too much to get there, to be like, hey, it's an intense game, where we've got, it's not Grouchy's not marching back from Waterloo, and it's like, okay, now Napoleon's got like a real good fighting chance. Is this going to keep Blucher off? But, when you're looking at the rule set and the special scenarios, I think you've set the stage a little bit with the abstraction. Like, hey, we have to get this to a 6x4. We want to kind of get this. I guess my initial question to either one of you would be is like, are you looking more for a historical simulation or a refight, in the sense of simulation is it might not go exactly the way it is. There's a lot of tension. There's ability for commanders to maneuver around the way they want. I guess to set the stage for how we get into rule set, when you guys were kind of developing that, what were you thinking on? Is this simulation or is this a dynamic war game with possible different outcomes?
So it leans heavily towards simulation. If a quick
unless
history,
Newman has the Indians.
Yes, yeah. But so the actual battle, what happens is a couple guys wake up early in the morning. They're tired of eating their hardtack, whatever, so they go out hunting deer. They march a couple miles from the camp. They see the Shawnee and the Mingo, and they have a little fight. And a couple of them get killed, and a couple run back. And they go, oh, there's thousands of Indians up the road, and there's 5 acres covered with them. And the general's like, the colonel's like, I'm not sure. Well, grab the first 150 guys from each and get up the road. And so I opened the scenario at the point where the 150 guys are up the road and they're getting ambushed. So immediately starting in action rather than, make some rolls if your guys find them. And, so we have to pick a starting point. So it's emulated in that fact. I didn't let you decide, well, I'm not just going to send 150. I'm going to send the whole column up, So we emulated it in that fact. The first salvo, instead of there's rules for leaders getting killed, we went with, nope, he's dead because he dies right off the bat. So we just killed one of the leaders right off the bat. The other one, he's shot 3 times in the shoulders and the chest, but he manages to hang on for a while. So we that's a nice surprise for the player because they see 2 leaders and they're just gone. We've abstracted the command and control. We abstracted, but it's still. It was more of a feeling thing when you played it as the native characters. You've got this huge force on these 2 little 150-man columns. They're in a march column, so you just pound on them at the beginning, and you're feeling great, and it gives that feeling of, oh, we're winning because we're killing so many militia. But then slowly that inevitable tide starts to turn as they funnel more and more militia up, and as the day goes on, and then you start to become, it's almost attrition at that point, and it's still a chance to, and the way we set up the victory points gave the Shawnee a chance to quote unquote win through victory points, etc. But I don't think there was ever be a way that they could
wipe them off
the table. So that's kind of how we handled that. So it relied fairly heavily on simulation, but there was a lot of nuance to it. With it, dice rolls, you roll bad, you're not going to kill anybody. So there's some variability to it.
So with the rule set, and you've told the listener and the viewer kind of like, hey, we picked Regimental Fire and Fury, and kind of what you talked about in the intro, in the sense of like you guys want to show that combat at that level, and I think it's recreated for that fight. It kind of measures compatibly. Like, what other things about that, or when you guys talked about it, were there other times where again, you got 120 days, right? We're putting our listener and viewer, we're putting ourselves in Newman and Jeffrey's spot. 120 days from flash to bang. Was there ever any other thought about like going through that tension of just your group, you two kind of coming together on this, like, hey, maybe we should do 28s, maybe we should do 10s. Is there something? Where is the feel? What is a rule set? Go for that, and how did you land on that? And then I'd like to get us to get into a little bit of the special scenario rules and how a GM can kind of pick those. But go ahead with the rule set.
Newman owned the French and Indian War variant of Black Powder, so we looked at those. I owned Regimental Fire and Fury. We also looked at the Daniel Mercy not Pikeman's Lament, the American War of Independence version of his books, and we probably could have done it in the Black Powder because you just do standardized visits, but because it was an educational tool, I kind of wanted to do it to scale. So one stand in Regimental Fire Fury can be 40 to 20 men. We went with the low end, the 20, to give us more stands, to make a more spectacle, more presentation for the kids. And it also, the rules were very effective with the fog of war and the way they handled the natives. And those kind of drove our rule set choice. Regimental Fire Fury is the right scale. Black Powder is a little more abstracted in. It's a big unit or a small unit, and you just choose the size. But with this, we were actually able to field at 1 to 20, and dumb here was thinking we were going to do 1 to 4 guys on a scale and call it 1 to 20. We ended up with 3 on a scale, 3 on a stand, because that would have been another mass amount. But anyway, that would have been a 1 to 5 man ratio, which would have looked great, but it would have been a lot more men to paint. So we went with the standard 3 mans, and so you have 200 men is 10 stands, which ends up being 30 figs, which looks good, at that scale. So that's kind of how we have abstracted that, and how we chose the rule set was based on the command and control is a little varied on Fire and Fury, so that helped the chaos a little bit more. Your guys wouldn't do what they wanted them to do all the time once they get into battle. Marching up the trail, you're good. They'll go up the trail fast, but once you get into fighting, it breaks down. And the way the combat runs in that is you're not doing massive amounts of damage. So it reflects more of the period of maybe every once in a while one or two. If you get 2 stands in a turn, that's an amazing high roll. So it kind of balanced that out as well.
Oh, that's awesome. The Newman, any other thoughts about the rule set? And did you guys, going back to Newman here too, is there anything that before we get into the scenario special rules to help you guys recreate all that research into the friction, were there any things that you stole from variants? I find myself doing that when I'm writing scenarios. I send scenarios to Wyndhurst a lot, and I'm like, oh man, this is good, and I've seen other GMs do that. Like, you steal the morale from a rule set. You're like, this will recreate this fight really well. I'm going to steal the way they do terrain or the way they handle this. Is there anything else that you were just like, hey, I need to plug this in, besides creating the special rules that we'll get into? Is there anything else you kind of cabbaged, whether it be from the Black Powder one or anything else?
Well, first, I'd like to go back to what Jeff was saying about starting it at it wasn't a true movement to contact, where you're starting at the contact. And I felt that was great, because there was still a lot of room for the Shawnee to pull it off and to do different maneuvers and everything like that. So you didn't exactly go, or there was the potential not to go turn by turn as to what actually happened, to mix things up there. And like I was talking about before, being a light infantry attacks, that was a really different dynamic versus what I had been doing with the Napoleonics, with cavalry and artillery and all that. But as far as borrowing anything, Jeff, Was there? It was more on the rules side. I was more on the making it pretty side. But
The
we,
one
we
of the
we
things,
discussed. We came over to my house and set the board up and everything like that, and discussed a lot of that. But
yeah, one of the things that we did abstract was the time. We abstracted the time a bit, and at some points they're throwing up logs and barricades in front of them to give themselves cover. We didn't really lean into that. We kept it. It's the woods. It's foggy. It's already hard to hit. If we
Yeah,
started
yeah.
throwing barricades up, nobody. It would just be a stalemate until all the militia got up there. Going down the creek was well. These get in more scenario specific rules. But
Go
the
ahead.
thing,
Go ahead. Yeah.
one thing we did borrow from Black Powder, which made the initial game effective, was since we're starting with the natives ambushing the two columns. If in the regimental fire and fury rules, as soon as they shot them up, they could just charge into them and massacre them. So that didn't happen. So the way we did that, we borrowed a rule from Black Powder, which said natives can't charge an undisordered unit. So they would, in the initial turn, they would disorder the other guys, but when it became their move turn, 90% of the time you're going to
Yeah.
rally out, so they couldn't charge in. So they had the advantage of firepower and pushing them back, but that gave the militia a chance to shake out into line, fight back a little bit, and keep the delaying tactic until the rest can show up. So we did borrow that mechanism from another. Other mechanisms we borrowed, not really. We pretty much stuck to regimental at that
No,
point.
I just think that's an important point because I think sometimes when people are trying to bring the battle to the tabletop and they're using a rule set, the rule set normally by the author or whatever, and the ones that we've talked to is designed to meet so much of it that there's tiny specifics of a battle that I think you can really elevate like you guys did if you're just like, hey, we're gonna like plug and play with this a little bit because we want the players to feel, like the Virginia militia or like the Shawnee on that day of. And I think, that if you're, the whole purpose of this is again trying to get someone out there who's thinking about embarking on their own project like this. I think don't shy away from reading rule sets and trying to incorporate things that make sense, can get that flavor on the table. And to your point, I mean, once you play Waterloo, right, and you show up to the table, I've seen people. The guy Little Wars TV did it where they were playing the Trebia, but they named it something else so the Roman player wouldn't know there was an ambush coming on the side of the river. Like flat out lying to the little kids and telling them it was a different battle, so they stepped into the Shawnee ambush. Wasn't an option. So I think it's interesting. How do we get that stress of the scenario we're trying to get, and you guys illuminating this to your participants, whether they be the 700 children or war torn war gamers. I think that's super impressive, and I agree with you, Newman, on the point of like starting in the ambush kind of gives you that whack in the face, and that's what you really wanted the player to get. And
yeah.
we can have people that are like, actually, I'm going to march off the road in column and try to go over here. And now we're in a weird land of different scenarios. So I totally co-sign and agree with you guys on that. For the special scenarios, yeah, whoever wants to field that, and again, you guys get into as much depth as you want, but I want to kind of get with your thought process on it, and tying into your research, how you're like, we're going to add this point of our research into the game, and here's a rule that we think will do it perfectly.
Yeah. So we picked points in the battle, that the significant points in the battle. Colonel Lewis dying in the initial salvo was very important. It it deflated the militia a little bit. The player, you're like, oh, and it really happened. Their colonel was shot. Plus, they're ad hoc units because his brother told him, said, grab the first 150 men that are awake from the Augusta regiment and the Botetourt regiment and get up the road. So these guys hadn't fought together. There weren't a lot of their NCOs weren't there. It was just the first guys that are awake and up the road. So it was chaos. He died. He walks back to camp and dies. So he just goes, I can't fight. So they're out leadership. The other guy does a heroic job of keeping his troops together and finally gets the line together. So we gave him a little edge. We made him instead of an able, we made him a gallant commander. So he could influence the militia to kind of balance out that initial punch. The sending guys down the creek, that was important because the natives lost maybe up to 100 Shawnee that just left and went down the creek to try to go into the camp. So we made a random roll on how many 3 to 5 stands that left and where they came from. Other scenario specific is the end of the battle. The colonel sent men up the high ridge and started firing down the Shawnee position. The Shawnees didn't know if it was Braddock's, or not Braddock, Lord Dunmore's men that were coming. They knew there was other men out there, but they didn't know who it was. So that was kind of the final impetus to make them to withdraw. So we gave victory points if you got guys on the ridge. We gave victory points here and there for the Shawnee number of killed. We also put in a mechanic where the natives were known. They don't know how many native casualties there were in the battle, because the natives would either hide their dead or they would carry them off. So we put in a rule that when you took casualties as a native, which were victory points for the militia, you could remove one other stand and cancel that victory point, because those guys are taking the dead away or burying them or hiding them.
That's
awesome. So if the militia, the very first time the militia shoots your native contingent, you might take that initial damage. But once you start thinking about, they're getting more points, and then you sneak your dead off, or take them away, that made it an interesting game. Because, ultimately, I don't think there's any way the natives are going to wipe the militia out and do what they needed to do. But putting in these little scenario-specific victory conditions, controlling the creek, they have to send militia up. There's a fight in the creek that's kind of independent of the whole battle. Whoever controls the creek at the end gets some victory points. So if the natives can pull that off, that small little conflict, there's some victory points for them. Keeping guys off the high ridge, number of, and distance traveled. We added some other specific things. We eliminated the barricades, because that would have made the game bog down more. We also, let's see, was there anything else specific? Yes, once the other commanders came up, then forgive me, I forgot the names of the other. We had some shifts in command, but we kept it basically the relief historic. We released on specific turns when the reinforcements were allowed to start marching up. So that led that slow trickle of reinforcements, rather than the guy just going, I send everybody up the road. So we kind of controlled that. So those are kind of the scenario specific. We look at the battle of how it actually progressed and tried to modify it so the player couldn't abuse. So they had to deal with the same situation the leaders were experiencing. That is a fundamental mistake he made. They said if he wouldn't have said, grab the first 150 guys, if he said, grab the first X amount of units that had fought together, they would have had a better chance at the beginning. And other things, the fog lifts at some point in the day and the sun comes out, so the rifled muskets of the militia shoot farther and more accurate than the smooth bore of the Shawnee. So at that point, we chose a turn for the fog to lift, and then the ranges increase for the militia. So then they can really start doing the delaying. They can just keep dropping back and shooting farther than the Shawnee. So there's a lot of little, to try to break it all down, look at what happened historically, and try to pick the important parts of the conflict to emulate. And then the tension. And then try to find things that model that through play testing. So if this isn't working, and then every time that they're doing this, try to figure out something, to fix it and make it more manageable or less. Ultimately, you have a fixed number of natives and a fixed number of militia, so that doesn't change. You could change that if it got, you could change the initial columns, but it worked. Just mirroring or emulating the specific parts of the battle and trying to not force it, but restricting what you could do to a certain degree really made the battle feel like the actual battle to me.
One of the best things, I think, and then Wyndhurst, I want you to rally some questions against them, but one of the best things I think that they did on this is I see GMs who are designing stuff like you guys are putting in the effort and the time, and Newman, the painting, the scenery, everything that you guys have done is just pretty awesome. Hats off to you both. But the one thing that I really like that I've heard you discuss, both you discuss, is I see GMs like, say, the carrot and the stick. And so the carrot and the stick kind of reward, or what you want to call victory points, where it kind of forces people to play in a historical, I'll say, azimuth, or on a road, towards this. Like there's maneuverability, right? We have ways to change kind of how it is, but it gives you that feel. But I really love the casualty one where, that can mimic you've used a point of your research to mimic real life Shawnee and Mingos, taking off their dead, but you've also put the commander of that force in that direct dilemma. Am I going to lose guns? Am I going to get these, maybe I need the guns right now against the militia versus denying them a victory point, time now. So I think that's I I understand the hill one, like, hey, key terrain in war game scenarios, like, hey, if you've got that automatically forces the player to kind of focus on those things. I think those are great tools, and it kind of guides, I'll say, in a little bit of the decision making process, almost to a brigade commander telling a battalion or company commander, like, hey, go take that hill. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. There's a bunch of ways to do it. That still allows them a lot of maneuver. But man, I really love the one where it's like, it's the one cookie today or two tomorrow with the Shawnee dead. I think, like, do you need the firepower to keep them off? I think that's truly impressive, and I wish people, when they're coming up with these scenarios, like that little finite tuning in the scenario, which may have came out of gameplay or your test games or anything, is just awesome. But I'm talking too much. I'll turn it over to Wyndhurst to respond to that.
Let me interject something real quick. So when you're thinking of game design, what is a game but a series of decisions? And if you don't have relevant, important decisions to make, you're kind of on autopilot. So any way you can work in a tough decision for a commander, I think it always improves the gameplay.
Yep.
And if you can emulate that historical decision, it puts more weight on it.
Yeah, that's the zenith.
That's what in every game I try to do, every scenario I try to design. What are the points of the scenario, the key moments where you've got to go with your gut and do something, or not? Those really elevate. So if you're looking at a historic battle near you, I guess the thing is, research the history and then pick out those moments that's important in the crux moments in the battle that the commanders have to make the decision, and force that on your players, and they'll have to deal with it. That's it.
Well, so
Wyndhurst has the next 3 questions, because I think they're going to go to some degree quick, but number 6 probably won't be so quick. Because I love talking about design and the rule sets, and as I'm coming up with my own scenarios, I love kind of teasing those things out. And Newman, the light infantry tactics of starting an ambush, I think that's perfect. There are too many people that try to do, let the player decide, and then you go off to shenanigans. And I love the, Jeffrey, as we talked with the wounded stuff, like I've beaten a dead horse. So Wyndhurst has the rest of the questions here, all of them, and I look forward to seeing how that goes. I'm sure I'll ask some alibis.
Yeah. So with the rules, I had been wondering before you all answered if you already had the rules in mind and you built the scenario to the rules, or you had the scenario in mind and you picked the rules. And it sounds like you answered, well, we had the scenario in mind, and then we took rules we knew and figured out what matched. Was it the same for scale? Did you already know you're going to start at a certain scale, miniature scale? Or was it, well, Chris is like, hey, I can paint you this many models at this detail, so if I'm doing most of the painting, I'm deciding the scale. Like, what kind of led to that decision?
So it was partial time constraint, partial cost, and partial what fit. So one is the number. So we broke down. We knew there were 700 on this side and 1,000 on this side. Well, whatever scale we're going with, this is how many guys we're going to paint. If we did 28 mil, which I already had Warlord Militia, and I think Newman had and Warlord Natives in 28 mil for skirmishing stuff. And like, if we do this is going to be a massive amount of stuff. 15 mil's manageable. You can still get some detail into it, but we're going. And Regimental Fire Fury uses 15 mil, so that helped too. And then it was a matter of we're going to use 4 or 3. And then we did some silly things like, do we put them on round bases or do we put them on the square bases? So for the militia, we put them in squares so they could rank up. And the natives, we left them on round bases, 1 inch. I think I've already talked myself in a circle. What was the question again? How we chose the scale? Yeah. So we just broke it down. And then so the cost effectiveness of it, I'm an Old Glory Army member. Blue Moon has 15 mil, French and Indian War. We're going to have to buy this many packets. Let's try to keep the cost down. So with the 15 mil, it was more cost effective because they're 30 guys for like $15. So, we ended up buying like 9 packs or something between us, and so that helped with the choosing the scale, the cost effectiveness of it, and the time scale. You don't have to put the level of detail in a 15 millimeter that you do a 28 to have the same visual impact. A little more lends it a little more weight visually, and you can put quite a bit of detail, as Newman maniacally demonstrated, on the war paint. So those 3 factors: cost, time, detail, and are we going to get the right weight for the battle? If you did it in 28 mil, it's going to look like a lot less guys fighting than doing it in 15, 10, or 6. 10 or 6, you're losing some of the visual impact of the war paint and the uniforms, etc. So we kind of settled on that middle ground of 15s.
Chris,
I believe
yeah,
that
go ahead.
15 was the absolute right choice on that, especially with the autumn, the trees and the mat. Everything just turned out great, and the Blue Moon figures, they had a lot of nice detail, and I unfortunately added a little bit more. But they were really fun to paint. They flowed well, and we were going back and forth. Like, hey, I've got these guys painted. All right, I've got these guys painted, and along with the trees. And I think that was absolutely the right decision. 28 millimeter, we never would have got done. 6 millimeter, nobody would have ever been able to see them.
So to build on that, and I want to start off, Chris, with you answering this. So talking still a little bit about scale and the timeline for the project. So, I mean, you guys decided the year of you're going to do this essentially, or within a year, less than a year's time frame to get this done. And I know, Chris, you mentioned that Jeff had done a lot of the terrain. Can you speak to the breakdown of how you all decided who's going to do what? And then if you could start with that, Chris, and then Jeff, you can add in anything he misses.
Well, we got the figures done first, and we kept on trying to decide, like he was saying about how many figures equal this amount, and we got that down, and we got all the figures painted, and then after that, it may have been kind of a rush to get some of the trees done and stuff like that. Jeff did a good bit of the trees, and my wife did some trees. I did some trees, and it all turned out looking really, really great. The mat was fantastic. I had never. Look, Ray had some mats when we do it Napoleonics, but this one, the autumn mat, I think it just everything just stood out. And the militia, some of them were painted with uniforms. Most of them were painted with just hunting jackets, and we could go through a lot of earth tones. So they were able to be painted up real quick. And the Shawnee, they were really great to paint. I had a lot of fun painting those. The war paint was fantastic, and then I took some little .003 pins and went in and filled in some tattoos and or war paint and other stuff that they had on them. And I wish we could have done 28 millimeter, but 15 was
Right
15
choice.
was
How did you
perfect. It was
decide
the right.
on the dividing the force? Like who's going to paint what?
We just kind of painted both of them. He painted some Shawnee. I painted some Shawnee. He painted some militia. I painted some militia. Actually, it may have been just however our orders came in from Blue Moon. From I ordered from what's it called? Noble Knight. They had some in stock, and then Jeff had his membership and ordered from directly from the manufacturer, I believe. But we would check in with each other. How many do you got done? Okay, I've got this many done. Okay, okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and order another a batch of Shawnee. Okay, great, great, great. I'm going to order some more militia. I think I'm going to order some French and kind of French and kind of fit them in there. Yeah, 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 yeah. They'll look fine.
I'm going to
Oh,
order some
there's my
Highlanders.
corgi. I ordered for we will be doing more French and Indian War. Um, and I have the Highlanders, and I detest painting plaid at 15 millimeter scale, but I did it. It's
So that there's a follow up question before I want Jeff's thoughts as well. And this is for people who are doing group projects like this. So, whereas I'll probably do the dual raid by myself, but if you have multiple people, how do you decide who gets what part of the collection? Because at the end of the day, your guys are each going to have half of this project or some deviation of this project. How, does that go into the thought process of like, well, I want these
The
units, I
hard
want these units?
questions.
Yeah.
No, not really. I mean,
No.
we live in the same town. If he moves,
Yeah.
I'll give it all to him. I don't care.
I'm not moving. I'll be retiring here in a few years. We're staying right here.
But to your questions with the previous one and this one, so when we started the project, we said we're going to need X amount of figures. So Newman had some militia, and Shawnee, I had some militia. The first thing I did was after I painted up my first popsicle stick of Shawnee and militia, is I went to Newman's house and I said, "Let me see your guys." Because if I'm painting completely different than you, this isn't going to work. So we looked at that scale, and he's using earth tones. I'm using earth tones. The Shawnee, we got some red pops on them and things like that. Skin tones were similar. I think you used more speed paints on initially. I did the layering technique, but at arm's distance. And so then we had the discussion of, well, do we put all of the guys you painted on their stands together and all the guys I painted on my stands together? No, we went with by intermixing everybody,
Mix them
it,
all
it
up.
made it made a more of what's the word I'm looking for? Not monogamous,
Menagerie?
mono.
Menagerie? I don't know.
No, same. They all look similar.
Okay.
I hate
Yeah.
that. I hate when I lose
Yeah.
words.
Homogenous.
So homogenous.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
is exactly right. It looked more homogenous. Some stands would have two of his guys and one of my guy, but I made sure when I was putting them on the stands that we had a good interspersing. And then the leader stands, we divided those up. He painted the militia leaders. I got excited and painted Blue Jacket, who's actually across the river and didn't show up, so he didn't get used. But we painted up leaders, and then as far as terrain went, I did an approach of like a bulk terrain where like one oval stand of is like 12 by 8 is a bunch of trees, and Newman and his wife did a bunch of individual trees, and so we interspersed the bulk trees in with individual trees, and it kind of broke it up. And we put the individual trees more around where the battle was, so it's easier to move, but it made more filler space. So instead of
Yep.
15 individual trees, I made one stand with a bunch of trunks, put a bunch of foliage on top of it. And it was a big clump of trees. So that is, for people doing a big project, that's an easy way to take up a bunch of space with terrain, is to do it in a bulk style. And then finally, you're going to love this, cigar box, autumn
Corey's the
mat.
man. Yep, Corey's the man.
Yep, the felt, and it was with that we were able to lay it over to make the ridges. So we didn't have to build the ridges. We just cut out foam to fit the size and cut our pass. And then as far as the rivers went, we just used floor tile in long strips and cut at that and made it wavy and high glossed it brown because the high river is always brown. And then as your earlier question with the topography, we made sure that the rivers were in the right spaces, camps, their streams, etc. But division of labor is important because I'm like, I don't know if I can get to these this week, and Chris would go, bring them over, I'll take them, or hey, can you finish these guys? Or I banged out a bunch. When we first started, I banged out a bunch. Chris was like, you're making me look bad. And so he banged out a bunch. And then I was like 2 weeks of not painting anything. I was like, oh no, now he's painted all this. So, and just communicate. And when Chris said we were going to go do it for battle days, Newman said battle days, I was like, we can't half-ass this. This is a lot of people are going to see it. So so I became a bit of a douchebag. I was hounding them all the time. Oh man, how's your trees look? What are you doing? What are you doing? What's your men? I was just hounding him. And he's still like, we'll get it done. Don't worry about it. He's much more down, level
Zen.
than I was. Yeah, more zen than I am. But yeah,
Everything's gonna be fine.
I think the more people you can get in a project, the better. As long as you've got the tasks separated. It's like any project, If you're going to go to a tailgate party, you bring the hot dogs, you bring the buns, you bring the ice, and work together, find out who's going to do the rules, who's going to do the painting, who's going to build the terrain, who's going to set up, who's going to go to meet with the council and make sure we can do it, who's going to have to buy a stupid outfit because they won't let him do it without it, that kind of thing. So, as long as you're all, communication's the key to everything, work, social, everything. Communicate, keep everybody updated, and then you're good to go.
So
Yeah, the division of labor was.
That didn't
I
answer
was
your
just gonna
question
say,
though. He gets the stuff. I don't care.
oh no, I don't care either. Some people might care, but we don't care. I was just going to say on the division of labor, it doesn't matter. We worked really good together, and nobody cared about like I only want to drill, I only want to paint the cool stuff, I only want to paint the tiger tanks, stuff like that. Everything got done, and it was really nice, and it
Hey, but if we'd have had a third person that said, "Hey, I want to help, but I only want to paint Shawnee," I'd have said, "Here you go. Here's Shawnee."
Yeah. So, Jeff, you actually
Yeah.
mentioned for our next question, you mentioned meeting with the council and, what do you have to wear, something special. So, talk us through, you have this idea and now you want to do it at an event on site. What does that process look like for yours all's experience? And obviously, everyone else's experience might differ, but what did it look like from you and what were some of the important lessons learned that you guys learned from that?
All right. The first thing you have to know who the person that can say yes is. So you've got to find out who's running the show and who can let you do it. And then you just have to sell it. They've never had a war game up there before. So the first thing I did was I got a bunch of figures that Newman painted and a bunch of autumn trees and sent them pictures. Oh, here's what it's going to look like. It's going to look like a museum. It's a good way to teach the kids because the whole battle, now it's a modern town. There is no battlefield for the Battle of Point Pleasant. There's the point where they camped. There's still a park, but the city is over the entire battlefield. So, sell it in an aspect of, people come here all the time to see the battlefield or whatever, but they don't get to see that bird's eye view of 300 men getting ambushed by 700 up the river, So trying to sell that aspect and really play up the educational aspect of it. If you're going, don't say, hey, I want to play my cool war game at the spot during the thing, Go, we want to come and set up to teach the kids or to educate the public and let them see it more as an actual visual spectacle rather than just reading the book about it, because that's how you play that up. But you got to know who to talk to. Then you've got to jump through their hoops as of they say, well, we'll bring everything. And I think the number one selling point for us was it didn't cost them anything. We showed up and set everything up and played, and that was it. So that was very attractive. I'd have come in and said, well, we want to come do it, but it's going to cost you $90 for us to buy the figs to do it. It may have, depending on the venue or the park, they may be willing to do that, but we already wanted to do it for ourselves, so it didn't cost them anything. That was really good. And but then they made us wear tricorns and stuff. So I've never reenacted. I think Chris did some Civil War stuff at one point, but
Did you have to
that was
have
my
full
initial-
get-ups or just hats?
I asked, could we just wear some tricorns? They said, nope. You can wear khakis, but you have to wear a hunting shirt. So we had to wear a hunting shirt and khakis. I said, well, these glasses aren't going to pass. Do I have to go buy special glasses? And they're like, well, no, not that specific. I'm like, okay. And then they made me shave my beard off. So
was Jake from State Farm had the khakis.
Chris, did you
That's
know
awesome.
anybody ahead of time, having been to so many of the battle days? Any contacts that helped you all in this process?
I did not have any contacts. I had actually delivered. They were at a couple times to some of the vendors and things like that, but I didn't have any of the contacts or anything for the specific day. Jeff did all of that work, and that was amazing.
So,
well, one thing that happened was I was coming back from our farm one day, and we stopped at the park, and they have a little museum there. And I went in and I met the lady who ran the museum. Just happens she's was on the council. I told her about the idea. I showed her some pictures. She's like, "Oh, this is exciting." And then I went through their Facebook group and then I went up and met them all and presented for us. And so it was kind of lucky that I met her at the museum too. That helped us get it in.
yeah.
Rather than just sending a blank email, hey, we want to come play this game at your place.
So I haven't.
The big thing. Oh,
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was
Chris.
going to say that the big thing in the town of Point Pleasant isn't the battle; they have the Mothman.
Oh,
Oh
really?
yeah.
So my experience with reenact events is very limited. I think events with actual reenactors, I've done one here in the States, one Civil War reenactment that they actually had reenactors for. And then when I was stationed in the UK, I did one kind of War of the Roses reenactment I got to go to. And they're very different. The one in the UK was one they do every year, kind of, it sounds like Point Pleasant. And so there's usually a very large area for vendors and things like that. Whereas the Civil War one was, I was very young. There were very, very few vendors. There were some that were associated with the reenactors themselves. It sounds like because they do this every year at Point Pleasant that it is a fairly developed thing that has a lot of additional vendors. And I know, Chris, you said you've mentioned delivering things to the vendors. From your lessons, for some of these smaller or less well-known events, do you have any like advice you could offer people that it's like, well, they don't normally have vendors at these kind of things? Apart from, well, if it's free for the venue, then there'll probably be more into it. Is there anything else you could recommend to sell something like this to an event?
I would say don't be afraid to ask. A lot of these places, they have their specific ways of doing things, and it's always been done like this. And when somebody has a new thing to do, they may be leery at first, but like Jeff said, he brought the pictures in, explained everything, told them that we were going to be respectful of the battlefield, respectful of the battle itself, and that it was going to be okay. And he's a really good salesman anyway. He a really good talker. So I'm sure that they were really excited to get a new thing like that there.
Yeah, Kentuckian, do you have anything to add on those last couple of questions before I move on to the last couple?
No, I just there's the wargaming aspect of it and like demoing it, what you guys did, and I think there's going to be, when Wyndhurst asks you about the event next, and like you walk through how that, I think showing this side of the hobby is just awesome, and that's why there's hopefully a young whippersnapper in that group that went through your dioramas and the kind of talk throughs of it that just kind of picks it up. It's so interesting. We live in these areas and everything. I just think you guys, the Chris, your point I think is well heard, and I totally agree with it. Like, just don't be afraid to ask. And there's a lot of wargamers, historical wargamers, out there, and it's something to demonstrate in school. Trust me, I remember like talking to every history teacher I had growing up, and there were some that did not want it. I just was like, okay, I'm going to ask next year. I'm going to have a new history professor or teacher, and I'm going to try to shoot it and say like, hey, you want me to do this thing, or I can show this thing as part of the period we're covering. And so I just think it's a way to highlight the history, highlight the hobby, and with your guys' engagement, it's a win-win, and what's the worst they can do? Say no. So I think it's super impressive and awesome, and I'll kick it back to Wyndhurst for the talk through on the event.
Yeah, so I want to kind of combine event with, because we've talked a little bit about it, with after action report. So kind of, you mentioned a little bit that it sounded like it was over more than one day event. Is that correct? And the first day they brought a lot of school kids. So kind of how did it go? What was the flow of the event like? And what was the engagement? Was it well received by the audience and everything? And then kind of after it was all said and done, what were your lessons learned that if you were to do it differently, what would you have changed?
Okay, so yes, you're correct. It was over 3 days.
Okay.
The park was open for 2 of it. So the first day was the private event. That was for school kids, grade school, middle school kids to come in on buses, and they set up, I think it was about 22 stations. So they had everything from a Punch and Judy show to our war game area to kids playing colonial games. They also had Davy Crockett. They had a cannon, which there was no cannon there, but they also had George Washington, and he wasn't there. But they had things for the kids to see and do. And I tried to, so these kids would come in groups of about 15 to 20 at a time. And then there was some smaller groups of homeschooled children that would come in groups as well. And they would just walk up to the tent we were in, and I would wait for them all to file in, and the initial would be like, ooh, look at that, what's that? And then so I would just start the battle, and I tried to time out the initial salvo of the natives. They had to when the cannon would fire, because it always scared the kids every time. So I would kind of look over my shoulder and say, they're getting ready to fire it, they're getting ready to fire it, and then we go. And then 700 Shawnee erupted in gunfire, and the cannon would go boom, and all the kids go, ah! And so it was great fun to try to time that out. But then I would walk them through the battle, and of course you get some kids that their eyes kind of glaze over, but I tried to make it exciting. When the colonel shot, he shot in the shoulder, and then he shot in the chest, and they knocked my hat off, and and try to imagine. And I would talk about how the Shawnee would try to imagine we're surrounded, and tried to draw them in as best I could. But overall it was a really good reception. The kids seemed to enjoy it. They had some questions at the end. The number one question I was always asked was, who did you make these figures, or did you paint the figures, or why did how many people were killed? That was a big question. So those kinds of things. I tried to keep it PG and less gory than the real battle was, but and then I had a little sign that said, "You are here in the camp." So I say, "You're here." So it was fun. The kids seemed to enjoy it. They enjoyed all of the things. Took some video of the kids watching the Punch and Judy show, and they were really belly laughing. It was neat to see something that old and pre-Victorian to modern kids could put down their phones long enough to really belly laugh at that. So we didn't actually play with the kids that day. Every time that the teachers would walk up, they would say, "Don't touch anything." And I would go, "You can touch the figures. It's okay." And surprisingly, none of them walked off. They all, when we got done, we counted them up, and they were still all there. So these were good little kids. Yeah, it was. Yeah. I was surprised. There was a couple on the ground that got knocked off that I found on the way out. But so the kids enjoyed it. From an educational aspect, it was weird that we're having battle days, but yet no one actually talks about the events of the battle. We were the only ones talking about it, and we walked them through exactly what happened that day.
Out of 22 exhibits. Exhibits.
I mean, you had Cornstalk, who would probably talk about how his people were mistreated, but I talked him through the whole. I toned it down. Lord Dunmore marched a bunch of guys over there to take the land. But we toned it and made it. Anyway,
age appropriate.
Yeah. Yes, and so then the second day was great because my buddy came down from Columbus to play the game, and some other guys. But there weren't many people the second day. The big day was the kids, hundreds of kids. The second day, and then we played the game all day and had a fun time doing that. And again, not as many people the second day. And then they had a ghost tour, and they had a parade and some other things they do. And like most of the subject matter, it's told from the daughters of American Revolution, sons of American Revolution. So everything is like, I had an ancestor that fought in this. There wasn't really the native people's representative or side of the conflict. It was all, the militia, Virginia. But that's important. And I would like to have seen a little more representation of the Shawnee and Mingo. There were a couple reenactors and things, but it was nice to educate them on the whole conflict, not just the militia perspective. So that was interesting. And the costumes were great. I guess the period specific clothing was fun. And then the takeaways are, if you're going to run a historical war game at a place, request a table and request the appropriate size table. So don't say we'll need a table, because you'll get a 4 foot by 2 foot table.
Card table, yeah.
Yeah, you'll get a card 4x4, 3x3, whatever. So just be very specific. We're not demanding anything other than I requested 2 6x4 tables, made it double deep so I could put stuff behind it. And then make sure if you're going to set up in a park ground and it's rained the night before, that you don't wear your shoes in the mud or have a way to transport. Make sure you're able to pack up everything and efficiently in and out. And have a buddy with you so that you can go to the restroom when you need to, and they can watch the table while you're gone. And just like always running a game at a con, even be enthusiastic about it. Fudge the rules if the kid looks to let the kids win. Kids are rolling hot. Wow, that's great. Just get excited about it. And then Yeah, there were some kids that seemed legitimately interested in the gaming aspect of it too. So it was a fun day, beautiful weather. Um, it was a good time. It was fun. And if anybody's in the Point Pleasant, West Virginia area in October, that's when they do it. And then they murder the chief cornstalk in May at Fort Randolph. If you're interested in that.
Chris, anything to add?
I know that those kids are going to remember that game and Jeff, because I remember being in elementary school during the bicentennial, 1976, and they had a reenactor come in, and I just remember, like, he was dressed in the whole colonial uniform, had the flintlock, the bayonet, and the whole 9 yards. And I was like, "Oh man, that's cool. This is the best day ever." So a couple of those kids, they're going to remember that. They're definitely going to
Yep.
remember that.
Yep. I think you guys made future wargamers, like
hope
the AR
so.
comments. I think you guys have made some in there. Did you have any with any adults coming through? I know as you guys played it on that second day, were there any adults that were inquisitive? Like sometimes we steal people from 40K or from the board gaming world that don't really know about wargaming or the painting, and it just takes somebody, if they see it online or anything, and they're like, that's too much work, too much painting. But if they talk to one of us, I feel like out there, it's easier to coax them into it and be like, hey, here's a real easy skirmish game to get into. But if you're interested in this Shawnee and stuff like muskets and tomahawks, or there's something like, did you feel like you had any of those when the in the adult category, or it's just 18-year-old kid and his girlfriend walking through saying, "Oh, this is cool."
I had met one gentleman that did dioramas of the battle, and I said, "You're halfway there, guy.
Yeah, yeah,
If
yeah,
you're painting up the little figs, all you got to do now is find somebody to play with." And but he was from hours away. His one of his relatives was in the battle, so he'd driven hours and hours. But he played it with me and had fun. And then the families would come through while we're playing. And Regimental Fire and Fury is a simple enough game that after a couple turns, you know the game. You
yeah,
know
yeah.
on the chart where to look. So at that point, I would just get up from playing one side and let the other guy say, set the kids down and just have him start teaching them or play how to play it. And that way I could be just enthusiastic cheerleader instead of having to manage the rules and things.
Yeah.
So, and as adults, the park ranger was really into it. He was like, "Oh, this is great," and he'd played things in the past, and several other people had mentioned they'd played some Warhammer and stuff like that. I said similar, except it's more simulation, and it's historic, and if you, I think, as historic war gamers, history is important to us. We enjoy history. That's part of the game, is that we enjoy history. So getting to share that love of historical events with other people was a lot of fun. You don't usually get that at a con. Everybody's there playing games. They're just there to play games. But when you go to a historical event, these people are vested in the history of it. You also get to expound on what happened in the history that we all care
Well,
about as historical gamers.
I totally agree with you at a con. It's all about hey, you're playing games, or it's the nerd fratricide is what I call it, where somebody comes over and is like, actually, those buttons were brass, Jeffrey. Like you didn't get that, and it just it takes the wind out of your sails, all the work and everything. Which
I was waiting. I was waiting for Cornstalk to come over and look at his figure and critique it, but no one critiqued anything about it because it's such a small weird battle. They don't know the battle; they just know the celebration, and there was a fight, and then there's not that. Well, we haven't found as historic records of the Batatot battalion wore these colors. They didn't have a flag or anything, so it was basically militia. Yeah, so there's not a lot to critique there as much.
Well, I think that's interesting. I wonder if that happens to people who do the dioramas at, um, more researched events or anything, or if they've run into that. I'm sure that's something. You can always have a grognard or somebody that's upset. But I'm glad you guys didn't have it. It sounds like it was all just, high clouds for you guys, which is awesome. And it sounds like you made, I'm sure you planted some seeds of wargamers. Is there any other kind of follow up on that AAR, Wyndhurst, or we'll move into the wrap up and then to our next few sections?
I don't have any follow-up questions. If you want to lead us off with the wrap up.
Yeah, so mainly turn it over to you guys. I think from flash to bang, 120 days, you can't get much tighter than that. You know, to go off of some of your themes, the teamwork that you both had, the idea, you know, Newman, you're pulling from light infantry tactics and your time being a devil dog, you know, to kind of recreate this battle. Jeffrey, you know, you guys are working together. I think it's everything that's great. And I'm sure you're not telling us anything in the bad comments. You know, you did say you were a little bit hot with him sometimes, Jeffrey, or then he'd catch up on you. So I think that's the same with every project. But I can't imagine you guys envision it going any better, you know, unless you make 100 wargamers that like Regimental Fire and Fury 5 miles from your house. You know, maybe that would be the only better beneficial part of it. But I just think it's awesome, and I really enjoy your guys' kind of aura about it. And then the fact of like, what's the worst that can happen? They say no. There's a lot of historical wargamers out there that I think are, you know, hopefully they get the inertia or the courage that you guys had to be like, hey, we're going to put ourselves out here. We're going to highlight this as something that we drive past, we go through, we know about this, and then it just pour your mind and research into it. I'm hats off to you guys. I think you did it really well, and that's why we wanted to highlight you. And just kind of where you're headed. We'll talk a little bit about where you're going next in our last few segments. But is there anything else that you know from the lessons learned from the inception of the project, or anything that you guys wanted to maybe that we didn't touch in, or any alibis on that? Turn it over to you. I'll go with you first, Chris.
No, just you know, going back to the we had this in our area. If you know, everybody wants to do Waterloo and D-Day and everything like that, but maybe, you know, check around and look around your area. And there might be actually something cool that happened, or maybe you have a famous veteran and you want to emulate his particular battle. We had the last living World War II Medal of Honor winner, Woody Williams. He was a flamethrower operator on Iwo Jima, and he's just lived right up the road until a couple of years ago when he passed. But you know, something like that. You know, a famous general from your area that went to go fight somewhere else. Uh, you know, just you know, sky's the limit. It doesn't always have to be Waterloo.
Yep. Jeff, any thoughts on that as well?
Thoughts on let's see, that just pick something manageable, pick a good timeline, assign the tasks appropriately, work together, communicate, and we were going to make this battle for us in our living room. We were going to make it regardless. The getting to do it, produce it for the event was just a bonus. And like Chris said, we're fortunate in the fact that so many small conflicts have happened around our area that it's you know, if you live out west, there might not be this kind of situation, but there's also very interesting things that you can do. Like West Virginia had the mine wars in the
Yep.
with the coal miners fighting. You know, that would be an interesting thing to maybe emulate. I don't know. You go set up at a mine and play it, or maybe you go to Blair Mountain, or you know, and set up. But
Yeah.
I don't think
Play in
they.
the bunker. Play in the bunker. Yeah, you play in the
Yeah,
bunker that they had.
yeah. But you know, historic curiosity in itself is a reward. So even if you don't ever end up throwing that historic battle at a place, or even for yourself, just reading about it and enriching your knowledge of history
Yeah.
is self fulfilling, and and you know, we enjoyed it. We again, it was a spur of the moment thing. I drive around and like to do it. Well, I'd like to do it, and we just did it, and that's all you got to do. Just Nike says, just do it. Just put your pants on and start painting.
I like it. I like it. That it goes to a lot of us have those blocks, and I think that nails it on the head. Like just start painting the sandals, the boots, whatever. Get after it. I'll kick it over to Wyndhurst for our one of our last two sections for kit bag. I know he'll pose the question to you guys, and we'll see what we come up with here.
Yeah. So as always, in the last two sections, we end every episode: kit bag and then scouting report. When we have a guest, we like to ask them for inputs, and they both gave us something kind of similar. And so we kind of summed it up into mobile painting. I know I've talked previously that I have like a painting chest. I can't for the life of me remember the name of the company on top of my head, but I've talked about them before. But what I have gone to more recently is I got like a hard shell or a soft shell makeup bag, which is the perfect size for holding like dropper bottle paints. And it's already designed to hold brushes, so I could fit paints and brushes and everything in like this little bag, enough, to paint like a tub full of models when I'm traveling, or if I'm just want to do it in a hotel or going back home. And so that was a really easy way to transport some stuff to paint when I'm on the move, as this lifestyle has. But I want to kick it over to Jeff and Chris. What your kit bag item was for mobile painting. And we'll start with you, Chris, because you can show us.
I have. We're remodeling our house, and so the garage is always full of materials and things like that. Eventually, I'm going to have a big workbench out there, but for now, I have a, Harbor Freight mechanics cart, and it has a few drawers and a nice little lid and everything like that in it, and it holds all my stuff. It has it's really mobile, and doesn't. Uh, I forgot how much it was. It seemed like it was like $150 or something like that. But I've used it for about a year now, and I'll probably be using it for a couple more years. And it has really made everything. I just wheel it out to the living room, and we watch TV, and I paint, and and there it's been indispensable.
Is that it over that's it over your shoulder there, isn't it?
Let's see here.
Yeah. So that seems really convenient because you can roll it around the house. It doesn't have to be like, I guess if people don't have a dedicated area, that would be a really convenient way. Like, I want to roll it out, do my painting, and then it can all tuck away again. So thinking of the
Yeah, it
mobile
would.
point.
It would totally fit in a closet or something like that, and for people that don't have a lot of room. And the bottom of it, I have a lot of kits that I haven't got to yet. A lot more Napoleonic French and Polish and things like that, and Victrix and Perry Brothers stuff. But and then I have there's tons of other stuff hidden away too, but I'll never get done. But that's a good thing.
Hey, I guarantee you, Chris, there's Shawnee somewhere hiding in your house right now with their
Probably there
gloves.
are. I
they're,
have an
they're in.
entire I have an entire Austrian army that I have been trying to get to for the last couple of years and have not made it. But
Ooh, if they
they're
team up
there.
with those Shawnee, dude, man, you're in trouble, Chris. You're in
Yeah.
trouble.
All right, Jeff, what was the one you had for mobile painting?
Uh, I'm a state employee and don't make a lot of money. So what I found was an old tackle box that is about the size of a bread box, but with a tackle box, it's deep enough to put the bottles in and your figures. Has a little tray on top for the brushes and a little handle. So when I'm going somewhere for work or the weekend or anything, I just throw some minis, some paints in there, some brushes, some paper towels, and I'm good to go.
The tackle box is what I used a lot too, and like painting in school and stuff, and when you're at university or when where you're wherever and you're transient for a minute. I think it's great. People that are remodeling their house or going through something like Chris has, I think that's an awesome one as well. Like, especially if you want to have everything on one piece of machinery, and then regardless whether you go into your hobby room gets uncluttered or whatever, you've got that kind of I don't know what to call it's like a bivouac site of hobby that you can just roll out and everything. Okay, it all scatters out and we're good to go. So highly recommend those. I know Wyndhurst has been doing work with his deployment. He went overseas with that box and got a lot of stuff done. So that's awesome. Highly recommend. I like the tackle box as well.
What are you using, Kentuckian?
I got the hobby space right now. The biggest thing is kind of just like Chris and Jeff said, is moving and shifting projects. I'm coming up with like little boxes that will contain the project itself. And there's a bunch of time. I don't know if you guys do it, but I'm a huge I'll say offender of it, but writing down the paints that you use for skin tones, for things like that, I don't do it. I try to do it. I tell myself I'm going to do it, and I don't do it. And so there's sometimes where I leave the paint bottles like with the project, and I'm like, I'm not going to forget you now. Like this Vallejo beige is what I use for this. So I've started doing like projects in their own containers that will hold them. So I've done that with some of my ancient armies right now, and I've just kind of put the paints in there with them. But tackle box is probably what I used for a good portion of my life.
Are you still using that like little, almost like folding table, so you could move around a bit? Because that was something I thought was quite
Yep.
clever for people, kind of
Yeah.
like the Harbor Freight. Like if, because I've often it's like, well, the wife wants to watch something, and yeah, that one. Like it's like sometimes I'll take a tray of stuff up where I can like sit on the couch and paint while we're watching together, so we're still kind of getting that time. So, thinking in that mindset of mobile painting, it's great when you have the space for a dedicated hobby space with a dedicated paint table. But if you've got families or you don't have you have limited space, sometimes you want to be able to move around and be sociable while you're painting.
Well, and if your wife's watching Downton Abbey, and you're on the episode of Who Stole the Spoon, and you don't really want to pay attention to that, it's a perfect tray to
Bite
pull
your
up in
tongue. I
front of
haven't seen that one yet. No spoilers.
No, so we'll move to our last section where we talk about our scouting report. We're still in the foxhole. We've swapped stories here for a long time, and we're kind of taking our binos out and looking on what's on the horizon. And what's on your painting bench, what's on your wargaming bench, what games are you going to play here soon, what's coming up, and kind of just like, hey, give us a trend into the holidays of what you got on the horizon. So I'll kick to you first there, Chris, for what's on the horizon, what's on your scouting report.
We're going back to the French and Indian War, Fort Necessity. I've got some British line that I've painted up, one artillery piece, and let's see, what do I have? I've got a command group that I'm painting up now. And so that's, I guess, for I think you all are y'all going to do something in December, because I'm not going to be able to, because my work
Nah,
where
it looks
they've
like
already
more like
told us.
January.
Okay, then I'll be out there for that one.
Are you guys going to go do it
Awesome,
on
awesome.
site? Do a Fort
We
Necessity game
could,
on
we
site?
could, we technically could. It's not that far. It's Pennsylvania, so
Yeah.
We go up in Gettysburg too, and take a look around there.
we'll go to the Philippi and do the Philippi races. Then we'll go up
Yep.
to Harper's Ferry. Then we'll go over to. No, we're not going to do that.
Harper's Ferry is one of the most beautiful places on earth. It is fantastic. It's
It is.
if you haven't
It
done
is.
it's great.
You guys are gonna play through the history of America and visit all the national parks. That's what you heard it here first, kids. The Ashland Wargaming Group. What's on
Uh,
Chris, with all of your painting and stuff in the Napoleonics? Like, I
Mhm.
know you've got you're like all of us on here. You've got projects that are popping out of the shelves that have been there. I've got projects that have been there for years. I don't like saying that word out loud because I'll get to them one day. But what's on anything on the painting desk besides the French and Indian? What's some like other projects that are lurking that you may get brushes to them in the next little bit?
Actually, I've been going back and forth. I've got a set of front rank French artillery 12-pounder, and I've got them all painted except for the rammer guy, and working on that one. I just finished up a couple of brigades mounted Imperial Guard officers, and
Awesome.
the one I had done the Victrix Barbarians, and I didn't do the mounted officer, and I went back and painted him. So I've got a few of those guys that I go back to break up the monotony of painting the little 15 millimeter guys, and trying to get some more Napoleonics done.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and you'll be painting Napoleonics until you die, because you got to get every
Basically,
army. So for
basically.
decades to come. But Jeff, what do you have on the scouting report? Games to be played, armies to paint. What's and Fort Necessity hanging out there in the winds? What's coming up next?
I hope everyone doesn't find this sacrilegious, but my main project for 2026 is to inventory and reduce the number of miniatures that I have.
So you're saying there's going to be a sale if I want to get
Yeah.
some stuff cheap? That's what I heard.
No, there is no sale. There's going to be a mass giveaway of
Oh,
stuff in
nice.
my basement. I've already found a home for the French and Indian in 28 mil.
Darn,
I've given
missed
away
that.
tons of 172nds. I don't have any. Well, I have some stuff for you guys that's a surprise. So,
sick.
but
Sick.
that I don't have in anything else. But when I was listening to your podcast and you guys were talking about some stuff, I was like, I'm going to buy that up and paint it and send it to those guys. And so you'll get something in the mail as a thank you. So,
Sick.
but as far as wargaming goes, I put up a little survey on our Gamers of Ashland group. What should I get into next? And everybody said French and Indian War, so that's why we're continuing with Fort Necessity. But I'm thinking about dipping my toe in the Italian Wars, and if Blue Moon does a 15 mil of that, that would be pretty easy to get into. And probably go with my oddball Cologne Wars, more of those German pikeman mercenaries, things like that. And then, there's always something that pops up, some new scale. I saw Josh playing Saga today. He's got that great looking
Mongol army.
Mongols. Oh, yeah. And I was like, I could. Oh, no. See, that's the problem with all of us. We have a problem here. So this year is to inventory, categorize, get rid of if I haven't touched it in a year, it needs to get home. So that includes a 72-man regiment of Bavarian, 7 years war figures that have only seen action once and annihilated.
No, that's awesome. That's man, your paint jobs are really impressive, both of you. So I look forward to kind of you guys. I really again, I haven't been back home in a while or towards the Appalachian Mountains in a minute. Shenandoah, I guess, not true Eastern Kentucky, but I hope to get back there during the holidays. If not this holiday, sometime, and get a game with both of you. Me and Wyndhurst, and whenever we get back there, we'll try to dip down there and get a game with you. But you guys keep posting. I love that group, and that's just for all the listeners and viewers. Like they're getting after it. They have a really nice group, and it's pretty local. And they post just like me and Wyndhurst. They're the whole reason that Wyndhurst is the real big proponent behind this podcast. And we were sending stuff and talking to each other kind of offline and like being an accountability buddy like I think you guys are being, and we just were like, hey, let's try to continue to increase this and get after it and give people new ideas and the things. And I would say, looking at the Ashland page of Wargamers, it's definitely been inspiring to me to see you guys work, especially this project. But Jeff, I was talking about your Janissaries. Chris, I've seen a lot of your Napoleonics that you guys had sent on there and playing games, so truly inspiring. Keep posting that stuff and motivating us. The Fightin Kentuckian scouting report is the Dastardly Romans. Me and Wyndhurst, you've heard it here. We've set a date, so I'm going to be stationed near Wyndhurst, 12 hours away. So that'll be a quick drive up to you. So we're planning to do a Syracuse game next year. We may, I don't know, Wyndhurst, we may be our first video battle report of that game. And it's something, it's going to be like a 12-foot table with a 6-foot wing, because we're going to all of Syracuse, and we're going to do the harbor with a lot of we've already kind of talked a little bit logistics. There's going to be a lot of painting in between us and everything, but there's one project to shoot for in 2026, and we'll be playing the game hopefully sometime during the year. But I will say this, we have a lot of work to do. So that'll hopefully motivate us, and we'll continue to heckle each other online. Continue to, boy lover Greeks, whatever you guys want to post, keep it PG. There's a bunch of stuff I just send Wyndhurst privately to throw shade at him. But no, the ancients I'm going back through. That's kind of my plan right now. I love Old Glory, Jeff. That's one of the things that I had Old Glory armies and everything in Ancients, and I just got rid of a lot of my metal, and so I went back to do plastics, and it's been a fun process to go through that. But Romans and a lot of my Punic War stuff, I just posted I was getting my Spanish together to give me a break from my Romans, and I really want to get to Pyrrhus, at least start on his army before the end of the year. I hope that happens. I'm looking at less than 30 days, so we'll see. And then, Wyndhurst, starting a bolt action league here, hopefully. Got a decent amount of players that are already kind of local, so look forward to kind of getting into regular gaming. There's a lot of great clubs, kind of like your guys' club in Ashland, that does a lot of historical games, but they're normally an hour and a half from me. And so just It was at Fort Campbell. Nashville has a great group with the Track and Hole Club, but it's a long drive for some games. So I'll try to make it as regular as I can to those guys. But looking forward to just kind of getting a local group and getting the more historical scene here in Charlottesville. And then Wyndhurst, I will say I was going to add Dark Ages to my project list, but he was a kind brother, he is, and talked me off the ledge of spending like
At
a
least for
bunch of
now.
money on Normans and Normans and Saxons. I showed him my Vitrix cart. I said the 20% off sale talked me out of this, and he was like, "You won't even get started to it by the time we live next to each other."
I've already got the armies. Why do you need to bother?
Yeah. So interesting stuff. But no, that's all I have. It's we'll see. And just like Jeff says, I'm sure something will pop up that I'll be like, "Ooh, shiny new thing." But Wyndhurst, I'll kick it over to you for your scouting report and then signing us off.
Yeah. So, like Kentuckian said, I'm also starting a bolt action league. As far as like games and events, it very fortuitous timing. There's very few stores here that really cater towards wargaming. There's a couple that really cater towards card gaming. There is a Warhammer store, but they don't count because that's all they do. But there's some local gamers like who had apparently have rented this space. One guy rented this space for his work, and the office space was way larger than they needed. So he's got like one office room that is like for his work, and this huge, big kind of almost bay area. And so they've kind of turned it into like a community hobby space. And I had gamed with a couple of them, and I was like, hey, they're like just setting it up and everything. And I'm like, want to do a bolt action league. I want to encourage historical wargaming in the area. And they're like, I was like, do you guys want to partner up and we kind of use your space? And like, heck yeah, let's do it. And so I've run a demo game there. We had 3 people for that demo game. I've run one demo here on base for a guy, and he was here yesterday. I was teaching him how to paint. He's never done any wargame of any kind. Never done any models. So I think we're like up to 8 or 9 players. So I'm really excited about that, which is giving me my Australians are kind of my break from the Syracuse Army, which is the other main big project I'm working on, and hoping to have Kentuckian relatively close for the first time in a few years. I think the closest we've been is when we met, even though we didn't know we were both from Kentucky before that, but being in North Carolina, we were like 2 or 3 hours apart. So a lot of Syracusans to paint. I'm not nearly as far along as he is. I got the walls done yesterday. Walls done today. I got 1 trireme done.
That doesn't count because it's easy. All you got to do is put some rubble. You won't need to even have a wall.
Well, I've got 1 trireme done, and I don't have anything to make it specifically Greek, so it can be one of your Roman ships I sink with my special weapons that my famous inventor creates. But I've got a 3D printed brireme I'm going to paint up next. I've got a trireme from Sarissa to try, and then I'll have a nice kind of comparison. Nice thing about the 3D prints is I can print as many of them as I want, but they're massive prints. So that's a big project I'm looking forward to. I'll probably sometime next year after our Bolt Action League is done, I'll organize a tournament. And I think by then I would have kind of built a pretty good historical community with Bolt Action. And then I'll kind of weasel my way into other games with them. But yeah, so the Australians for that, and then the Syracuse, those are my main 2 projects I'm working on. So that's really it for me. I will be going home over the holidays. It sounds like you guys will kind of be in and out over the holidays, and that's kind of why we normally do like our December episode is our year in review, because we don't have time for anything else other than just talking about how it's been. But Chris and Jeff, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. I know you all said you're fans and you're thrilled, but for us, it's really an honor. Kentuckian keeps saying like this was kind of my brainchild, but it was more of a kind of like how you all started this. It was like, I've kind of been thinking about doing a podcast. He's like, so have I. He's like, let's do it together. And I think that's how great things start. A couple of buddies say, hey, let's just try something and give it a go. So having guests on like you guys who are passionate about the hobby and willing to share your experience is the whole reason we do this, because I am guilty of it. I think the community with historical wargaming in particular is amazing. It's super supportive. I mean, Jeff, even talking about like, well, I'm going to downsize and I'm just going to give this stuff away to other wargamers. Like that's something I have seen from so many wargamers. Like I just want to give you all stuff because I want to help out the community. I want to help out other people. I think it's great. So thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and, share your experience with us and hopefully with our audience and motivate them to try what you have tried and learn lessons from you also. I really appreciate that. And before I sign us off as Kentuckian, if you have any final thoughts, and then, Jeff and Chris, if you have any final thoughts before I sign us off.
No, thanks again for coming, guys. This has been, we really talked about how to integrate. We're still going to do an episode where we play a historical battle with different rule sets and just talk about the friction and like how we think it feels and kind of maybe use it as a comparison with those rule sets. But we had kind of thought about that. I want to say Wyndhurst 6 months or a year ago, and then we saw you guys posting on that site and like the inertia that you had behind it and the intent behind it, and it was just like, man, that's awesome. They're doing this, and so for you guys to walk us through is just it's awesome. It's been a privilege. We truly appreciate it. We hope to talk to you guys again soon, and then roll dice at a table with you. But thanks again for coming on. Can't thank you enough.
I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the opportunity. This has been fantastic.
I want to say thanks, guys. This is a 29th episode. You're pumping them out. That's awesome. I'd like to do one shameless plug. It is the Gamers of Ashland on Facebook. Gamers of Ashland. So if anybody wants to reach out to you guys about historical gaming, or how to do a scenario, or wants to talk to us about anything, it doesn't have to be French and Indian War. If you got a scenario you're coming up with and need some ideas or any help or anything, reach out or just check it out. And then my buddy Corvinus Wargaming, he's on YouTube. He could always use some hits, so check him out if you're into Renaissance, Ottoman Empire kind of stuff. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll just give them one more shout out for the going to their Facebook page. If you're anywhere remotely in their area and you're interested in wargaming, I can tell you these two guys would be more than happy to put a game on for you. You don't need anything other than to show up and have a good attitude and willing to roll some dice. It's a great hobby, and there really is no excuse to get in it when you've got awesome individuals like this who would be happy to put a game on for you and just show up and roll some dice. You have one piggyback?
I got one last thing to say. Ray Rediker, if you're listening, I expect to see some Hussites and some Egyptians painted this year. That's it.
Yeah, he better be listening. You better make sure he subscribes and follows and what all that stuff is, people say. But again, we thank everybody for listening. Please engage with us what you think if you're working on projects like this. The comments, we more care about the comments because we like the engagement with the audience. They do help, get us out there, more people see it. But really, we just like to hear what you all think and engage with you. But without anything else, grab your sword, your spear, your belt-fed machine guns, and join us on the next On Patrol. Dismissed.